Welcome to the November 14th, 2023 work session of the Mayor and Council for the City of Hagerstown. This meeting is now called to order. And first on the agenda is council vacancy. And so the council last week decided in a closed session that they decided to process, and the process was that they were going to appoint. And it was a pretty quick discussion and unanimous to appoint Peter Perini to the city council. And so on our regular session next Tuesday, Peter Perini will be sworn in and join directly right after, take his seat. I feel like the reason why was because Peter has well knowledge already of city government. His name was on a ballot. And he watches the meetings, and he's been present. He was present for orientation. And so it was just with us getting Matt, and Matt being appointed, myself coming to this seat is a lot of change for this body. And I believe that they made the best decision. Do you guys have anything you want to add to that? What you said?
No, all good.
All right. Next up, the moment that, of course, special recognition for Chief Steve Lohr, Hagerstown Fire Department. I thought I was next for the preliminary agenda, but this is way more important. Hi, Chief.
How are you, Mayor?
So,
I'm struggling with a little bug here today, so I don't want to.
I'll stand back.
Please.
Thank you for your courtesy. Special recognition presented to Chief Steve Lohr. The City of Hagerstown would like to recognize Chief Lohr for your dedication and active role in fire service since 1971, not only as a volunteer firefighter with Funkstown and Antietam Fire Companies, but with community rescue service as well. On June 9th, 2015, Steve, our chief, became the City of Hagerstown's fire chief after retiring from Montgomery County Fire and Rescue Services in 2014. Steve was recently honored as the William F. Foster Outstanding Service Award honoree at the Spartan Emergency Response 2023 Fire Truck Training Conference, the FTTC, in Lansing, Michigan. The award recipient is an individual chosen for his many years of support of the professional emergency vehicle technician training and certification process through the Emergency Vehicle Technician Commission. The City of Hagerstown extends our sincere gratitude and recognition to Chief Steve Lohr for your dedication and service to the citizens of Hagerstown and for making a huge difference in our community. Chief, thank you for your leadership and thank you for your service.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all
Yes,
very
we
much.
do need a picture, Chief.
Okay.
There you go.
Now, for the reason we all come.
Feel like they're out of the intro music.
You guys ready? Council?
Ready.
All right. It's the agenda review. So, our regular session next week, November 21st, 2023. I'll call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. We'll have invocation given by former council member Bob Brucci. I have a pledge to the flag, announcements, a rules of procedure effective December 1st, 2020. Use of cell phones during meetings is restricted. All correspondence for distribution to elected officials should be provided to the city clerk and should include a copy for the city clerk for inclusion in the official record. Our meeting schedule for December is Tuesday, December 5th, 2023, work session at 4 p.m. Tuesday, December 12th, work session at 4 p.m. Tuesday, December 19th is our regular session at 7 p.m. Tuesday, December 26th, no meeting scheduled. There will be appointments, Board of...
And that's where Peter will be appointed.
Okay, yep. So appointments, first we'll do our council member Peter Perini, Board of Code Appeals for Terry Wisher for his term to expire November 30th, 2027. Board of Zoning Appeals, Ms. Janice Kellish, term to expire November 30th, 2026. And then City Ethics Commission, Mr. Richard Wilson, term to expire September 1st, 2027. Proclamation for Municipal Government Works Month. Citizen comments, and then we'll have the minutes, consent agenda. Should I read that? Engineering, Greens at Hamilton Run Street Restoration Surveying and Construction Management Services. Frederick Siebert and Associates, Inc., Hagerstown, Maryland, $55,380. For fire, turnout gear replacement, Whitmer Public Safety Group, Williamsport, Maryland, $36,280. Planning and Code Administration, 2024 Ford Maverick, Keystone Ford, Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, $27,330. For police, we have a 2023 Ford Explorer, Keystone Ford, Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, $39,700. Two 2023 Ford Inceptor Utility AWD vehicles, $44,596 each. New Holland Auto Group, New Holland, PA, $89,192. For Public Works, we have bulk diesel fuel, material to be presented. We have bulk gasoline, material also to be presented. Rental of 20 golf carts for the Greens at Hamilton Run Golf Course, Capital Golf Cars and Utility Vehicles, LLC, Frederick, Maryland, $149,414.40. Two 2024 Ford F-150s for parks, replacing number 302 and number 313. Keystone Ford, Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, $88,400. For utilities, fire hydrant purchase, Core in Maine, Martinsburg, West Virginia, $81,129.24. Wastewater, Muffin Monster bottom purchase, JWC Environmental, Santa Ana, California, $49,275. Wastewater, Ferric Pumps, Sherwood Logan, Annapolis, Maryland, $24,470. Wastewater, Liquid Oxygen Purchase, Air Gas USA, LLC, Horsham, PA, $24,340. Wastewater, Oxygen Building Roof Repair, Bonded Applicators, Inc., Waynesboro, Pennsylvania, $12,366. Wastewater, UV bulbs in assemblies, Viola Water Technologies Treatment Solutions, USA, Inc., Leona, New Jersey, $41,530.20. Wastewater, methanol metering pumps, Sherwood Logan, Annapolis, Maryland, $28,194. For unfinished business, approval of an ordinance amending Chapter 64 of the City Code, Building Standards. Approval of an ordinance amending Chapter 64 of the City Code, Property Maintenance Standards. Approval of an ordinance amending Chapter 64 of the City Code, Electrical Standards. Approval of an ordinance amending Chapter 64 of the City Code, Plumbing Standards. Approval of an ordinance amending Chapter 64 of the City Code, Mechanical Standards. Approval of an ordinance amending the City Code by repealing and reenacting Chapter 140, Land Management Code. Approval of an ordinance, Local Conversion District Overlay Amendment for Cypress Street. New business, approval of a resolution authorizing the sale of property located at 263 South Prospect Street. Approval of a resolution, Public Art Agreement for Hub City Garage. Approval of a revised subrecipient agreement for Hagerstown Youth News Corps Internship Program. Approval of a memorandum of understanding for Washington County Police Academy. Approval of power purchase and sell agreement with AEP Energy Partners, Inc. Approval of request for proposals, RFP, for Strategic Properties Grant Program. Approval of request for proposals, RFP, for Upper Floor Housing Grant Program. Approval of Invest Hagerstown City Center Redevelopment Grant Application for 105 and 107 North Potomac Street, Firehouse Rentals LLC. And we'll have city administrator comments, mayor and council comments, and then the meeting will be adjourned.
And there are additions to the consent agenda, the fuel and diesel. I passed out the consent forms for that. The county bid will be awarded next Tuesday, and this is staff recommendation for awarding that contract for both of those. And also today, Also, we need to add an open container exemption for the Chris Kindle Market coming up on December 8th and 9th, so we'll add that one as well. And then, Michelle, did you want to say something about the vehicles? There was another
So,
piece of information on that.
there's currently a question regarding the ability for us as the state of Maryland to piggyback on the contracts for PA CoStars. So for now, and again, till we seek additional clarification, I have struck through that on the consent agenda forms and marked them as sole source because it's very difficult for us to find vehicles. So I do not recommend, I still recommend moving forward with those purchases because otherwise we are going to be having a long duration and a long wait period if we go back and start all over again.
Thank you.
And there will be an executive session next week at 6:15 prior to the regular session. So there are just a couple changes.
Anything else, though?
I think that's it for now. Thank
Not used to
you.
hearing Donna this much at these meetings.
Okay. Fire response discussion, and Chief Steve Orr, our fire chief.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I assume this is to get to a decision point on fire response plans outside of the city limits, if I'm incorrect about that. I have to share with Mayor and Council, we have discussed this at great length many, many times. This is a legacy issue that dates back at least 6 years when we put the automatic aid agreement into effect with Washington County and the volunteer companies surrounding the city. It is 100% my command staff and my recommendation that we do not deny services outside of the city limits. We cannot live without the resources that come into the city, and it's my opinion they cannot live without us. More importantly, it's my personal opinion that we should not try to balance this issue on the backs of the citizens, whether they reside in the city or reside in the county. It took us 3 years to put an auto aid agreement into place with signatories from this group and the Board of County Commissioners, where the closest resource responds. That's good practice in any jurisdiction, Timbuktu, Iowa, Hagerstown, Maryland, Washington County, Maryland. I just can't morally unwind that, and I would ask for your support to find another way to get to the legacy issues that we've all struggled with over the last 8 years. I know it's frustrating for council, it's frustrating for the fire chief. I was looking back through my folder to date regarding fair level funding in the city, and particularly the city fire service. We have met with 5 county administrators, 3 finance directors, with 3 city administrators, and we have yet to get an audience with the county commissioners themselves. And to the best of my knowledge, unless it's occurred some other way, we have never received a written response on the issues that we've raised in those years. So I'm certainly willing to participate in that any way Mayor and Council decides. It's ultimately your decision, but I just have to recommend as strong as I can, we should not deny the citizen service. Just last Sunday night, we lived on transfer companies from outside of the city. Everybody we had that was working was committed to a fire in the East End, and that's not an irregular occurrence. Whether it's transfers, whether it's added on to the safety dispatch, you all get those updates from me every time we have work that is a post-flashover fire better. And I normally try to share as much information as I can when we have it. So I'm certainly willing to answer any questions, entertain any conversation. I think we've budgeted 15 minutes this evening, but, or if you'd like to get together, we have a whole legacy. Some of you are aware of that, some of you are not, as newer council members.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, for me, it's not a highly complicated issue. And I think that the first clarification on mutual aid is there is no other municipality in Washington County that provides this service, right?
Municipality.
Correct.
Not a volunteer fire department.
Right.
Yeah,
There's no
municipality.
other municipality that has
You're
this as
correct.
one of their services.
You're correct.
But all municipalities in Washington County receive the same exact tax differential, right?
12.5 cents.
12.5 cents. And like for me, I don't know that I'm sitting here speaking as a council member as much as I am a resident of the city of Hagerstown. Because as a resident of the city of Hagerstown, I pay roughly $1,200 a year in county taxes, and I pay roughly $1,200 a year in city taxes. And I have an awareness that roughly $75 of my county taxes provide for what is the county's responsibility, which is fire rescue and EMS services, right? City of Hagerstown says that level of service is not adequate for what we expect to have for fire service within the city of Hagerstown. And the county says that's okay. If you don't feel that that level is adequate, then you as a municipality should make the decision to provide the additional level of service that you feel is appropriate. And so the city of Hagerstown, we make the decision to provide an additional roughly $300 to $400 in city taxes that go to a city-paid fire system. And as a resident of the city, I understand and I accept and I expect that that paid city fire service is going to be there, and I'll receive it as a resident paying for that service in the city of Hagerstown. The reality, however, is if I were to live just two streets over, right, I would still get that entire $475 worth of fire service. I would just only have to pay $75 for it. That's a reality. The person who lives where I live, 2 streets away, pays the $475. And I would be okay with that just as much as I'm okay as a city resident agreeing and accepting and expecting that I get the paid city police service, which is about $700 of those city taxes. However, the county says to the city of Hagerstown, as part of that 12.5 cents, a big chunk of it is going to be because you provide a duplication, i.e. city police service in the city, which negates the expectation that the county has to provide that level of service. And so they provide that differential. Fire service isn't just the only city service where there isn't a recognized differential for the city of Hagerstown. But 2 other things happen. The first is we pay the $400 and then that service goes outside of the city. And so there isn't that expectation that it'll be there in that moment of necessity, absolutely for an in-city event, right?
It is limited and controlled, though.
It is limited and controlled, but the resident's paying for something that is being provided elsewhere. Nowhere else within our governmental structure do we do that for any other department, for any other service. 0. And not only do I then have to pay for that service to be provided elsewhere in the county, but the county then looks at that service in the city on the volunteer scale for that responsibility that the county's supposed to provide and says, you know what? The city's providing such a higher level of fire service in the city, that we should direct those county fire contributed resources outside of the stations in the city, so that the city resident actually gets less for that $75 than other absolutely equal county taxpayers in the county in which they live. And that, to me, cannot continue to exist. That would be like providing water or sewer out to Fountainhead, which is, I believe, double, right? Because it's outside of the city, and saying, you know what? We're not going to charge you double for water and sewer out in Fountainhead. We're actually going to give you that water and sewer at 25% the rate that the city resident pays for water and sewer, even though the city owns and operates, manages, maintains, and is responsible for that water and sewer system, right? That just doesn't make sense in my mind.
So, council member, as a taxpayer, if I took off all this nonsense, I agree 100% with you as a city taxpayer. I just can't morally do it as your fire chief, knowing that if you were visiting your neighbor and engine 5 is closer to you and you or your family member have a cardiac arrest, that they're not going to get, or that Station 3 on Eastern Boulevard, just on the other side of Antietam Creek is the county, Colonial Park, would we really entertain 4 trained people, 2 pieces of apparatus sitting there and watching a house burn?
So then that, I guess, begs for me the question, am I to assume then, by that statement, that the volunteer fire rescue and EMS system in Washington County, for which I receive the service of as a county resident, is it adequate in the city of Hagerstown to not have to have that service?
It's adequate in the eyes of the governing bodies, which we do not have. You have heard me say for 8.5 years, there's 2 overarching umbrellas issues in fire rescue in Washington County, city of Hagerstown. 1 is governance, 2 is funding. And we have been unable to change both.
And, you know, and I hear that, and it's difficult for me because, if I'm not mistaken, I think you and I both presented the county commissioners with a chart as long ago as 2016, right? We sat at this table, so to say we haven't had an audience with the county commissioners, I think is not correct, because I do remember putting that chart together, meeting with you, putting my own chart together, providing it to when it was Commissioner Leroy Myers and Commissioner Baker and you know, that administration. And them saying, sitting across from this table, this chart's interesting, we'll go back and we'll take a look at the numbers. And now we are.
And it died.
Now we are 7 years
After their
removed
comment.
from, you know, we'll go back and look at this issue. And, you know, in the interim, we've gotten report after report from your office in which an incident clearly occurs outside of the city, to which our paid fire department rightly responds, which then begs the question, and I know you're saying it's limited, but to hear you say that it, you know, that's limited and measured, that we're going to send it, you know, 10 minutes ago at the beginning of your presentation, you also said, in such instance, we had, you know, volunteer companies coming in. So I have to, you know, have a little concern sitting at this table representing the 40,000 people that are paying that extra $400 a year for a service they expect to be there, in that pinch as you describe, being there in that pinch as you describe, when you know, that limitation and measure is pushed, you know, beyond that point.
So rarely do we get asked for more than 2 engines of ladder. That's our limit on automatic aid versus mutual aid. If they make a request, it either comes to the shift commander, beyond that, or myself. I could count on one hand probably the number of times that we've exceeded 2 engines and a ladder. But it gets back to the closest resource argument for all of our citizens. The money thing is real. The governance thing is real. What I'm saying, I guess, in a Reader's Digest version, you identified that we started this journey in 2016. It remains unresolved. I need political help to do that.
So when you're talking about that apparatus responding, I remember as a commissioner and being liaison to the fire, the Volunteer Fire Association meetings. And here, just in the last week, ESAC has been abandoned, for whatever reason. I'm sure there were decisions. So, but if I recall correctly, those county apparatus are insured up to a certain age, I think it was 8 years, by the county,
I
right?
believe that's changed, but yes.
And 15 years ago, 20 years ago, the apparatus before the most recent ones we purchased, the big ones that are, $1.5 million, there was a time of day where it was heavily volunteer-driven. And I said then, you can't buy the apparatus of today on the volunteer level of fundraising that exists. You can't build buildings of today. It just isn't practical. And any county elected representative out there that thinks it's so is fooling themselves. You can't staff the places of today the way you could then. You just can't. And so, we went from full volunteer coverage of cost of those types of capital needs to 80% to 50% to now the city being the 80% contributor, right? I think that was the number on the last couple. And I'm just going to guess that those apparatus that we pay for at the city level are not insured through that county insurance
not.
program. So that's something we don't get.
They're not
right?
fueled.
Right, I mean, none of
They're
that
not-
stuff.
They do provide,
So,
they do provide hose testing, ladder testing, and a few stipends, I'll call them. The extra money that the commissioners awarded to the Volunteer Fire Service was extended to the 6 volunteer companies in the city of Hagerstown, but not all that money makes it to the street. And
Right.
it's certainly, not all of it accounts for staffing, vehicles, and in some cases does account for equipment.
a very small fraction.
A very small fraction.
When you speak of the stations within the
Now,
corporate boundaries of the
We
city.
do use 4 of their facilities. And if the volunteers were sitting beside me, they would argue that we don't pay rent for those facilities. What would we do if those facilities were not there? In
And
the
I-
city.
Right, and I think that question has come up in the past, much like the 911 center conversation. Would the other 8 municipalities have that requirement? In other words, we don't look at the stations that are in Funkstown and Smithsburg and Boonesboro and Hancock the same. We just don't. At the county level, we just don't. Even though we sit here and conversate as if they function in that similar nature. So to say that, we get that for free, or at no charge, isn't reflective of the greater financial deference that those stations that happen to be located in the other municipal jurisdictions in the county get. From manpower to apparatus to insurance to building maintenance, it is different.
There's no question that difference exists, Councilmember. I would argue back that one of the reasons I have chosen to stay in the city as a resident, whether it's trash collection, where my kids get on a school bus, leaf collection, police force, fire protection, we tend to exceed what the county accepts as what has been traditionally known in the history of this service as a respond from home to a community-based fire station. And if it takes 12 minutes 20 minutes to get to the emergency, evidently, the county taxpayers accept that. There is no standard of cover in the county that I'm aware of. They simply inherited whatever resources were there. The community-based fire departments, there is no deployment strategy, and more importantly, no response goals. I've sat in front of this committee before and said, look, we want to get there in 6 minutes. We average about 4. The risk inside the city limits is just simply higher than any other municipality in Washington County.
I hear that, and I guess the difficulty I have is going back to when the county, asked me to serve on the ESAC board, and then asked me not to talk while I was at the ESAC meetings.
Was there,
Oh, yeah, I think back, unless I'm spoken and asked to speak. So I guess I hearken back to one of those early meetings where one of the representatives from one of the companies, and I won't say which one or which representative, was at the meeting and explained that I just came from the station, I was the only person there all day. The only reason you don't know that the station is unmanned 16 out of the 24 hours a day is because there aren't any calls at that station typically, and if there are, then it's backup. Otherwise, as a resident, you don't know. And so I guess, the difficulty that I have there is I thought that type of dialogue would generate more immediate response to want to change. And I get that change comes with cost. And I feel like that's the biggest obstacle that doesn't want to be embraced. And I can't help but feeling that one of the biggest reason that doesn't want to be embraced is because as long as the city taxpayer is shelling out $475 a year to make sure it doesn't have to be, it's not going to be. And there's just nothing right about that.
I can't disagree with the financial portion of that argument, and I won't attempt to. My disagreement is with what are we here sworn to do? Who are we to protect? And how best to do that? So what we're attempting to do here, and what we have done, is provide industry best practices, follow the law, all those things. There is a cost to it. So evidently, the county taxpayer is content with, when I joined the Funkstown Fire Department in 1971, don't hold me to this number, but it's close, ran 76 calls in an entire year. We're running close to 10,000 here in the city.
Wow.
That's a huge difference. Now, I will tell you that Funkstown is now one of the busiest, let's call them a suburban border company, where they're probably running 1,200 calls a year out of that station. The primary benefactors are Funkstown, Halfway, Mulligansville, and Long Meadow.
And I guess when I hear that, I think I struggle even more with the way things are currently, because I can recall going to meetings north of the city and volunteer stations in that area conveying, we wish the city would stop annexing because it takes areas in which we stand to gain to support our operations. And it's like incentive has actually declined over time as we
So once
improve
again,
our
for-
service capability here.
Somebody that's been doing this more than a minute, I think that's an empty argument from those companies. I bet you there's not one that derives more than 20% of the revenue from collecting in their assumed areas. All those areas were formed based on tax districts and had nothing to do with public safety. Nothing.
Chief, I don't want to put you on the spot.
No,
So
please do.
please, please don't feel obliged to answer this, but I hear you from an ethical standpoint. I don't think any one of us wants a house right outside of the Hagerstown City District for Hagerstown Fire Department to sit and watch it burn down, or, that's unacceptable. But, I mean, we can't argue that there's a financial inequity here.
Wouldn't attempt
What the city's paying for, versus a county. City taxpayers are just essentially a much larger burden that's put on a city taxpayer. And it's kind of like at a workplace, you're doing a great job, so here's more work, I think a lot of us are familiar with that. And so I don't want to see, our emergency services to me is the most important thing. Fire and police, it's critical, okay? What other tools do we have, though, to help solve this? I hear that this, and I haven't been here long, so I apologize. I hear that this is festered and this is continued for such a long time, this issue. Well, I'd love to solve it, or at least try to get us in the right direction of fixing something. Do we have any other tools, or do you have any other suggestions of a way that we can try to affect some change, or at least try to, maybe try to raise some awareness of what's happening, and maybe try to help us to start a dialogue with this? Because if it's been going for so long,
I think there's any number of issues, most of which are above my pay grade, but I'm certainly happy to participate in as a taxpayer. As Kristen says, I can't argue with his facts. He's right. There's water, there's tax differential. So if we can't get to the table and have an honest, open discussion about fair level funding for city fire services, the bigger issues, fees, whether you charge somebody to flush a toilet outside of the county more than you do inside of the county, all these other plans and urban growth and medium range growth and all those things are factors here. Annexation, Krista brought it up. I really think that, look at the latest reports about overcrowding in city schools. I'm sure you're all aware of that. I pay attention to those things like you do. I don't know, there are big issues on the table. I don't believe that if we stopped responding outside of the city tomorrow, it would be a strong enough message to get the people that need to be at the table to the table.
Well, and I think it's important to point out for the listener, and not us sitting at this table that have intimate clarity, if you will. But, as I said before, there are only four, right? Four city or municipal. There are four municipal fire companies
It's actually 6.
left in the big jurisdictions, three of which, so don't count Baltimore City, right?
Elsewhere in the state.
Right, elsewhere in the state. And here's the reality. I believe it's Annapolis, I believe it's Salisbury,
Salisbury.
and Cumberland.
Yes.
I believe Allegheny County.
Ocean City is separate too, I believe.
That's probably a different animal.
Yes.
But Allegheny and Cumberland have a fiscal relationship and recognition that offsets that partnership,
Yes.
right? Annapolis has differential, which recognizes it, and I believe Wacomico actually pays Salisbury almost like they would a contractor to provide that service. So I don't want folks listening to be confused that the city of Hagerstown's, one, asking for something unique. We just simply uniquely don't get the same relationship as those jurisdictions that provide that service in other counties, because it is a county responsibility. I mean, the state law is very clear. This is a county obligation, it's county responsibility. And the other point is folks that live in the city are county residents. Folks that live in the city pay county taxes, the full county taxes for all of those services that we discuss, except for those that are recognized for differential. And so all of the folks in the city receive the same level and are afforded the same level of response capability that the county deems appropriate of that 26-station entity that provides that service in Washington County. This is different.
Chief, I personally didn't expect you to think that this was a great idea. So I kind of knew that, it wasn't going to go over super well. So when we changed the logo, when we changed the Hagerstown City logo, I have never seen more city residents and county residents really upset about it. They didn't like it. They still don't like it. It's here. I think one of the things that you said was getting the political support to make these changes and not going against everything that you live for and do for the fire department, as every other fire department member. So it really comes down to getting the support of the residents to understand exactly what is happening. The words tax differential, the words fair level funding, too big. Too big. And it really comes down to getting the support of the people that are actually paying where it is, unfair. Bottom line,
It
it's
is
unfair. And making them as mad about the money that deserves to stay in their pockets, as mad as they were about that logo, that I personally love, but still. And I think that is because there's so many changes in our administration, there's so many changes in whether it's an election year or a new administrator or a new council person or a new county commissioner, and all of us getting on the same page at the same time. It's like all the election years bounce around.
Yeah.
It's been 8 years, and you've worked so hard to make the change. But I think that it really takes an effort, almost a marketing effort, to make people really clearly understand what's happening.
Have you ever seen this issue, the ones you mentioned, whether it be tax differential or fair level funding, explained in the Herald Mail?
No,
Nor have I.
no.
So
I've never heard the words. Well,
They're
tax
just too big, they're
Well,
just too,
We have done that. If you remember, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when we had a joint meeting with the commissioners, I think we put it out there in pretty much, fifth grade grammar, what this tax differential is all about.
I
Tip jar
appreciate that.
gambling back in the day got a full expose over multiple weeks.
I bet you had to pay for I bet you had to pay to read the article.
But we can provide that education.
Yep.
From the
Right.
city's level, to not even worry about the newspapers or
But
whatever. We can
ultimately,
take that.
all that does is work potentially every 4 years, right? During an election. We shouldn't have to wait through that time to be able to have honest discussions. Nobody cares about politics, at least, I won't say that. I don't care about politics, to be honest. It's just about what is right and what is not. And we may not always be right, but we're not always wrong either. And to be able to have that honest, frank discussion that works a lot of times that we can never have because we're on a 10-minute time limit, 15-minute time limit, where we can sit down. That was what I was hoping, and I know the former county administrator was hoping the same thing, that the Wilson plant visit would have been a great time to have that discussion instead of it becoming, why do you do this? Why do you do that? Well, you do this because, no, that's not it at all. What needs to happen is there needs to be an understanding of what services we provide. Like it or not, City of Hagerstown ain't going anywhere, right? And we have 45, give or take, citizens here that not only are city residents, that are county residents, that deserve both of our attentions. And you would think, you as elected officials, us as staff supporting you, that we should be able to sit down and have these discussions about what is fair and what is not. I mean, we've done this, I know, I started in 2004, we've been doing this for the last 20 years and not getting anywhere.
Would it surprise you to know that the differential in fair level funding dates back to post-World War II?
No,
between the
not
city-
surprised.
Between the city fire department and the county.
Saddens me, but.
And the differential is not, the
It's
issue with
exactly
differential is
50%.
not going away either. We know that from a state level. The differential is a problem in 93 other municipalities that are going on the state level to try to get some resolution to how the tax differential should be done. That, go ahead, Councilman.
No, go ahead. You know, in 2009, I visited all of the companies throughout the county when I was a commissioner. And at that time, I think the number was 175 million. In other words, if the county had to assume the responsibility of that entire system overnight, to put adequate manpower, adequate apparatus, adequate buildings,
As it was deployed at that time,
As
not
it
the
was
most
deployed.
efficient deployment.
right, at that time. And I think that, and I could be wrong, but I think that differential, in part, from a county perspective, looks at the operations the municipality determines to provide and says, okay, the municipality is providing these operations in lieu of us having to assume that responsibility or resume that responsibility, right? And you look at the city police, Hagerstown Police Department, you say, okay, that's a $14 million, annual cost that the city has. And I think that the differential in that is like $4 or $6 million, right? So it doesn't cover the most, but it recognizes that the city's doing something that the county would
Over and above.
likely assume the responsibility of if weren't there tomorrow. And when I go back to those numbers, if the volunteer system were to fold tomorrow, that would be the county's, big, right? That would be the big number. If the city's paid fire department were to not exist tomorrow, the county would not be able to function even briefly without that. And I think that that is part of that recognition of differential that I don't feel is getting across. I think that there's an understanding in every other operation that is accounted for in that equation. And I can remember, because I was a commissioner, when we made that change to the 12.5 cents, and the majority of the board at that time felt that the system was fine, that the city, if it wanted to provide something more, then it was of the city's own accord. We're not there anymore. We're 14 years removed from that decision. It doesn't exist that way anymore. There is an absolute need for both. And I don't know how you convince that, but if I had to do the numbers, and I tried to do it before at the ESAC meeting, City of Hagerstown residents shouldn't be paying $400 a year, $475 a year, and county residents shouldn't be paying $75 a year. Everybody should be paying about $200 to $250 a year. If you really sort of sat down and said, you know what, take the hats off and the uniforms off, if you're just saying the service as a blanket, that's the number, right? And I don't know how you get there, but that differential, I think, equated to about $2.5 million. And to me, I just look at it and go, it's not complicated math. This jurisdiction, this municipality provides this service that we don't have to, and therefore we need to recognize that within the differential and provide some equitable percentage that we recognize we have to pick up if it didn't exist there tomorrow.
I would say it extends well beyond the fire service. You mentioned the police. I'd like to advocate for the colleagues behind me, IT, Public Works.
But we get that in that
All
12.5 cents. That's what I'm saying. We don't get any portion of that 12.5 cents.
For fire.
For fire. It's the only one that's not included. And if you had to include it for the city of Hagerstown, unlike the other 8 municipalities that don't provide anything at all to that effect, that would be about the number. So your 9 million would be about 2 to 3 million in differential to say, man, if that didn't exist tomorrow, we'd be spending about $3 million of our own county-level money to reinvent and redeploy them.
I certainly haven't been able to make that argument to anybody that will truly listen. Evidently, you have not. So my own experience with this statewide is, and I'll ask a difficult question back, I don't think I asked Council, or answered Councilmember Schindler. Is this body prepared to sue the county over tax differential?
I think coming into this elected body in 2020, we had this conversation so early on. And one of the things that we asked,
At the
especially
ESAC meeting,
Councilmember
you know,
Burnett and I, is
City of
how-
Hagerstown
what
residents
do we
shouldn't be
need to
paying
do to make
$400
sure that it's
a
different
year,
this
$475
time?
a year.
And
And
here
county
we are
residents
with
shouldn't be paying
3 years
$75 a
later.
year.
We
Everybody should be
understand,
paying about $200 to
everyone sitting in
$250 a
this
year. We
room,
really sort of sat down and said, you know
that
what, for
sometimes,
$75 a year.
and
County
here we are
residents shouldn't be
with
paying
3 years
$75 a
later.
year.
We
Everybody should be
understand,
paying about $200 to
everyone sitting in
$250 a
this
year. We
room,
really sort of sat down and said, you know what, for
sometimes,
$75 a year.
and
County residents shouldn't be paying
years
$75 a
later,
year.
we
Everybody should be paying about $200 to
sitting in
$250 a
this
year. We
room,
really sort of sat down and said, you know what, for $75 a year. County residents shouldn't be paying $75 a year. Everybody should be paying about $200 to $250 a year. We really sort of sat down and said, you know what, for $75 a year. County residents shouldn't be paying $75 a year. Everybody should be paying about $200 to $250 a year. We really sort of sat down and said, you know what, for $75 a year. County residents shouldn't be paying $75 a year. Everybody should be paying about $200 to $250 a year. We really sort of sat down and said, you know what, for $75 a year. County residents shouldn't be paying $75 a year. Everybody should be paying about $200 to $250 a year. We really sort of sat down and said, you know what, for $75 a year. County residents shouldn't be paying $75 a year. Everybody should be paying about $200 to $250 a year. We really sort of sat down and said, you know what, for $75 a year. County residents shouldn't be paying $75 a year. Everybody should be paying about $200 to $250 a year. We really sort of sat down and said, you know what, for $75 a year. County residents shouldn't be paying $75 a year. Everybody should be paying about $200 to $250 a year. We really sort of sat down and said, you know what, for $75 a year. County residents shouldn't be paying $75 a year. Everybody should be paying about $200 to $250 a year. We really sort of sat down and said, you know what, for $75 a year. County residents shouldn't be paying $75 a year. Everybody should be paying about $200 to $250 a year. We really sort of sat down and said, you know what, for $75 a year. County residents shouldn't be paying $75 a year. Everybody should be paying about $200 to $250 a year. We really sort of sat down and
Meeting for the county commissioners. It's clear that this topic needs to be on that agenda, and not only the next meeting, but continue to happen and not fall off the radar, and we just continue to have this conversation until we get to a resolution that's fair.
That's right.
So that's my proposal for the next item.
The political, the jargon, all of that, it's too much. It's too much. Right now, we're at the edge of
And it
this
needs to be more than a 15-minute, 20-minute conversation.
Absolutely.
Well, this was just with us by ourselves, was it almost an hour?
Right.
Is it?
Just some of the things that, we've got the annual things, this is obviously one, tax differential, as it relates to funding, that kind of stuff. One that's cropped, the one we can't take off is the 911 center, and which was a collaborative effort, appreciate that. We all heard the other night, when we were at the Chamber of Commerce dinner, that Washington County is woefully in need of residential development, ripe for residential development, but where will it go? Because their resources issue. They're going to West Virginia, they're going to Pennsylvania. We need to come to some collaborative effort to figure out the water issue. This is not just a city issue. It needs to be addressed with the county and with other municipalities as well, the ones that we serve, Smithsburg, Williamsport, Funkstown, and come to some sort of collaborative effort and figure out how we're going to do that. The second is, the second one would be an understanding of the county commissioners as to the city's future role in the narcotics task force. The myth is out there that we are pulling out of the narcotics task force. We attempted to make the case on last week that is not what we are looking to do, but times have changed since the 1970s. And it needs to be revisited as to how NTF operates. That is not that we are pulling out of NTF at all. We can't afford to pull out of NTF, especially when 80% of the issues occur here in Hagerstown. That needs to be clarified, and there needs to, again, to be collaboration. And then we also need to understand what's next on, with ESAC being eliminated. We need to understand what the governance is for emergency medical management services in this county, and the role that Hagerstown plays a major part in. We need to understand that. We can't do this in 15 minutes or 20 minutes. And I know, I feel that you all are willing to put the time in to have these discussions. We just need a willing partner to do that. And when I say partner, I mean that, a willing partner to do that. And if we can do that, we'll be educated, they'll be educated, maybe we can come to some decisions, because like I said, like it or not, we're here, and we do provide services more than what other municipalities do. And that doesn't make us any better or any worse than any other municipality, but it does make us worthy of having that discussion and the give and take.
And instead of going around and having all these conversations about what the city is doing and what the city isn't doing, how about as an elected body, we sit down and we talk together? Like, that doesn't, it seems so elementary to me that you're not gonna have a conversation about it, but you're gonna spread it all around that the city is doing this, the city is doing that. How long do we have to sit in a corner and be like, oh, we're gonna take it because our constituents, we're always the bad guy? Yeah, we're the bad guy regardless. So we're the bad guy every time we do the right thing. We're the bad guy, like, so what? Like, this administration has been one that has just done whatever it needs to do in order to make sure that the community knows that we're present. The community knows that they have a voice at this table. And I think that it's really sad that we have to have these kind of conversations and tiptoe around how we have them, because, good Lord, don't want to piss off one of the county commissioners. Can I say piss on air? I already said it, said it twice.
Said it twice.
Like, don't want to mess with the county commissioners and have them not speak to us or not do, but that already happens. It already happens. So I don't understand this. I'm running to conflict. Because that's how you get collaboration. That's how community gets better. Like, we can't do this avoiding. I'm not gonna talk with the city. It's the city's problem. It's the elementary, chief.
I would add one more to that agenda item for you to think about, would be school capacity in city schools.
Absolutely.
And how that affects our ability to provide economic development opportunities, and where it has created recently some issues between the two.
What is the ask of the body of me tonight?
Thank you, chief.
Yep.
I just can't support not sending
We
minutes now.
understand.
We deferred for some time with actionable items in between, whether it's meet and confer, whether it's whatever.
How about this? I get the impression, and I understand within the laws of Maryland that you basically can't tax your constituents for specific services. I believe public safety is one of those. We can't, property tax is what covers the cost of providing public safety services within the city of Hagerstown, right?
Correct.
And we can't charge a fee for something that by law is included in that taxable structure. I would be interested to understand whether that is applicable to just your jurisdictional boundaries, or whether that applies if you provide that service that is a taxable service outside your jurisdictional boundaries. Because we're not taxing, or we're not charging a fee for the jurisdictional properties that we're providing that taxable service to. Does that make sense?
It
So if
does.
you're telling me that we're sending paid personnel and we're sending specific types of apparatus outside of the corporate limits, then to me, it would appear, at least on the surface, that we should explore no differently than we would send other utility services outside of the city, that they come at some charge. Because the entity receiving that service is not being charged for receipt of that service.
My fear has always been, philosophically, I don't disagree with you, as always. My fear has always been it'll start another tit-for-tat battle, so that when they come into the city, whether they.
Who's that?
Emergency run, any of the
No,
volunteer
you,
companies.
I hear
in the
you
county.
saying that. I want to reiterate, because I feel when you say that, you confuse the public. The volunteer system is required to respond to all parts of this county equally at all times. There is no coming into the city. There is no city boundary that exists for Hagerstown, for Funkstown, for Boonesboro, for any municipality in this county as it applies to the responsibilities of the volunteer system. It doesn't exist. I, who live on Virginia Avenue,
Yep.
pay the same $75 for that volunteer, that county volunteer system, service level, that the guy in Big Pool pays.
Absolutely.
It's all absolutely the same. So there is no coming into the city. There is no
they.
coming into Funkstown.
We are the
There is
county.
no they. As it applies to the county level of fire service, it is entirely a they. Everybody's in the they. What I'm saying is, there is a component of residents and property owners within a specific jurisdictional boundary that say, we're going to provide something different, something above, something beyond what everybody else has agreed they all want to pay for at a level they've agreed. And if
So-
we're going to send that out to those areas that aren't paying for that, then there should be some fee associated with that.
Where I was trying to go with that, council member, is there's a large number of services that we cannot and are not equipped to provide. Hazardous
Okay.
materials, water rescue in the form of boats.
Okay.
We do high angle, we do a lot of things, and our members provide support for those teams and resources out in the county. Why I would not want to bill for service is that I think it would start a tit-for-tat thing that, whether it's a volunteer company, whether it's a DES staff member, whatever, when they respond into the city for whatever reason, that would flip back and forth. We have good data that I would tell you that last year, we went to the county about 1.5 times more often than they came into the city.
We went elsewhere in the county.
Okay, I get your point. We are the county.
There is no
I
jurisdictional
got you.
boundary.
Okay,
So there is no ability for a county volunteer station to charge for coming to another part of the county because the entire county system is required to respond to the entire county.
I don't know that they agree with that, but that's fundamentally my argument.
Well, then
is
if they
there
don't
should
agree
be no
with,
boundaries.
if they don't agree with that, then I should stop paying that portion of the county tax.
Yep, as a county resident. Yep. I think, is it?
Any other topics?
Are we done now? Is this it? Okay.
I think we got our, I think we got our
Do you have any
topics for
snacks,
sure.
Donald?
I mean,
Chief, thank you. Sorry, I know you're
No, no.
feeling our ire, and it's not directed at you or HFD.
I don't take it that
you
way
know.
at all.
I mean,
No, I think
insanity
we
is
sit on
doing
the
the same
same
thing
side of
over and
the-
over and over
The
again and
discussion
getting
is
nothing.
Even having it,
Yeah.
in different perspectives, we sit on the same side
We
of the
absolutely
discussion.
do. Thank you all for your time.
same thing.
And we're here till January 7th. If there's something I can do to help fix this, you know.
You better
my
hurry
prayer
up.
is
But-
we get
but-
it taken care of before you retire, Chief.
Now, like I said,
My prayer is we get it taken care of before you retire, Chief.
You do that, I'll sing at your wedding.
I'm getting married.
but it is, Sandy's doing the same thing over and over again, getting the same result.
Yes.
We've got to stop that. We've got to stop it.
And I think that if,
Who'd you
maybe,
say?
if we have the
We're,
opportunity.
there's a lot of us crazy as heck around here, I can tell you that right
If we
now.
had the opportunity to get this meeting that we all yearn for, I would really like to extend an invitation, because a lot of times it's just us.
Yeah.
It's a public meeting. I would like to extend the invitation to GHC, to the Chamber of Commerce.
That's good.
That it is a full, very public, very aware meeting with whether it takes diagrams and illustrations and very, very clear indication as to what we're asking for, not in the sense of all charts and numbers.
So I can tell you, at least on one of these topics, the water topic, the presentation that Kathy and Nancy
Yes.
did with Jill Baker down at RC Wilson, they're reprising that presentation at GHC this Friday.
Good.
at GHC and the Chamber's request. So I think that was a great, that's a great opportunity for them to collaborate and provide the same information and hopefully understanding that was hopeful that you all, of course you all, and the county commissioners would understand. And I think that could be a start, but I do think there are obviously underlying situations that still need sitting around the table and having that discussion, back and forth, coming to some agreement as to how things are gonna move, especially when it comes to water. And the tax differential. Tax differential's coming whether anybody likes it or not. I can tell you that for a fact, from a state level. It's coming whether anybody likes it or not.
The county commissioners represent the same people that we do. It's as simple as
And it
that.
has to be more than 15 minutes.
And I hope and pray for collaboration, but to answer Chief's question, if we can't sit down and have, I as part of this body am prepared to make some sort of a drastic decision, to make a point, honestly. I won't speak for anyone else, but,
That's
you
this
know,
council's prerogative.
I think we need it, and if we can't, I think we need to find a way to make it happen.
If I was bold enough to limit the response outside of city limits, then I am bold enough to go to the next step if there isn't a meeting that we can come to an agreement.
Yeah, and I appreciate, Councilmember, your, Alshire, your language with making sure that we're not using the language that is like Hagerstown is separate from Washington County. I think that that's a huge part of the problem with language is that we have, and I say, I've done it too, you know, well, them and us, and versus that we're all here together. So thank you, because I think that that's something that definitely the community needs to hear that language, that there is no us and them. This is, we're all Washington County. It's all of us. So thank you for highlighting that.
I will get that information to the county administrator and see where it goes.
Thank you.
And I growled on purpose. Yeah. Not sorry. All right, so where are we at?
4:50. 20 minutes late.
Sponsorship signage at Flying Boxcar Stadium.
Yeah,
Scott Nice
hopefully we'll be able to start
and
moving
Brittany
quickly through these.
Arizmendi. Our
Come on up,
community
Brittany.
engagement. Come on.
So, staff met with the ball team a couple weeks ago and talked about promotional opportunities that the city could have with the ball team. A couple were pretty much no-brainers for us, and they were lower impact money-wise. That would be a half-page ad in the program for every homestand, and then a video that would be similar to that which you see before a movie at Leitersburg, or I think Leitersburg is at Warehouse Cinemas, that talks about every week what is going on at the city and shows Brittany in an elf costume and all that good stuff. So those are the kind of things that we'll do at the new stadium. We'll do the video. The video will be updated for every homestand, so that, I think that's a great opportunity. The second thing we'd like to talk to you all about is an opportunity for larger signage within the stadium. We were, in your packet, we were given some options as to location of that signage. It could be on the outfield wall, like the old municipal stadium had signage on the outfield wall, or there's an opportunity to put signage on the end of the suites that will wrap from Summit all the way around to Baltimore, which will, you know, obviously it's where the suites, the press box and all that are. There are varying prices on that, but because of the pricing, one, I wanted to make sure that was something that the council wanted to do, and two, if there was any preference as to whether you would like, if you would like to do that, whether there was preferences to location or size of the signage. I think we would like to see something more square than long. And that's why the signage, actually the little more expensive signage is that, because of the square foot area that we would be using. We all liked the side of the suites as a way to have a nice representation of not only the city logo, but also downtown Hagerstown, the Main Street logo as well, to incorporate in that. But wanted your input as to whether we should just stick with the program and the video, or if we could take that next step and advertise this a little more prominently within the stadium.
And the suite option is actually not in that packet. That's kind of a one-off. They only had 2 of those in, for this.
That's not buying a suite, that is putting it, because there's no
It
suites
would
by
basically
the way.
be similar to this, so it will be the city logo, and you would be able to see it basically as soon as you walk in the stadium, probably even from the street, I would think.
Yeah.
What's the cost of that one then?
20,000. Over a 3 to 5 year period.
And I think for me, I'm not as interested in where as I am what.
Yeah.
Like, I'm reading these and I'm like, we are a constantly moving entity in terms of messaging. So my preference is that you select something where you're able to adjust messaging over the course of the year to make sure folks, in other words, seeing that logo in some stationary fashion doesn't tell me anything, but like you being able to say in some messaging fashion, in whatever, mechanism is offered here.
And
say,
we've
"Hey,
already,
this is happening."
we've signed that agreement for the video, and so I know during
And the
this.
program.
And the program. So for the videos in the summer, we do that weekly, and they said they can update that basically for every homestand.
Would it be better, as, like you're speaking of, like the electronic, like scoreboard type of thing, in order for us to be able to change the message as needed?
No, it would be a static. It would be, just like at the old ballpark or any others, it would be static signage.
Like a hanging thing.
No, what you're saying,
Yeah,
though,
I
to
just don't
change
have
the
a need
message.
He'd just like the ability to change.
What, the static one, or or what I just said?
I don't feel the need for some static thing.
Right, you're saying to change it, so the only way to do that would be
She's
like
saying we're already doing
electronic,
that.
right?
But the video would.
Right, she's saying we're already buying
satiate
into that.
right?
Sorry.
Yeah, but, no, but the video is being played at Warehouse Cinemas.
No, he was using that as an example.
Yeah, the example of what that video is.
Well, I thought we had to go to the
It
movies
is
to
being
see
played
it.
at Warehouse Cinemas, but then it would also be played
Oh,
here as
okay,
well.
Okay. I think that's effective. I mean, the static thing, I mean, again,
I like the video.
What does staff feel the benefit, or the benefit of the $20,000 static Hagerstown logo inside the stadium does for us?
I think it's more of a support kind of thing that shows, Hagerstown is willing to have that type of support within the stadium. We've had, just like at Municipal, the number of places that would put up signs along the outfield wall. That's pretty much the only place you could put it at Municipal. But if you go to any ballpark, you'll see, it would be nice if you had a way, like on the baselines, where you had that signage, like Councilman Alshire was saying, that could change. But in this case, they're not there. It would have to be some sort of a static, basically a sponsorship type of a thing, that would have to be maintained for that 3 to 5 year period.
so $20,000 for 3 to 5 years. Is that what it is?
In here.
$20,000 for
20,000
a year?
It's 20,000 a year, I believe,
Right.
for a 3 to 5
3
year
to 5 year
commitment is what they're
commitment.
looking
And we have that money.
Yeah, this is just me. I'm interested in devoting some part of funding to some promotional process during use, I'm not interested in any stationary, I don't feel,
And that's
That
why we're
serves a
bringing
purpose.
this
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah, I don't think it from my marketing background, I just feel like
I'd rather you have the
there's-
$20,000 a year to
Yeah, do stuff.
flexibly do stuff, you know what I mean?
Even
In
if
the
that
stadium.
means the city pays for bobblehead or something.
Yep.
I mean, whatever that looks
Yeah.
like, but I don't know that you guys are more marketing than I am, for sure, but maybe that 20,000 could be better used in a better way,
We had-
even with the state, even
Yep.
with the ball field. you know.
We had thought about, having city nights, city staff nights there. I know that economic development is interested in potentially being able to rent out the suite that they're keeping as kind of the all-purpose suite, to be able to rent those out for economic development prospects that may come in, those kind of things. So yeah, that would be in addition to any of the promotional stuff. We just wanted to make sure with the conversation we had, and Michelle Hepburn wasn't with me, so Brittany had to, kind of hog tie me there
Say,
on that one.
let's pump the brakes.
But just, that would be in addition to other things we want to do at the ballpark, which we will absolutely plan to do, not only for potential development opportunities, but for staff as well. So if y'all good, we'll do the program, we'll do the video, and then we'll pass on the signage, and we will then look to develop a plan with the ball team as far as establishing some nights through, and do it that way. Use that funding that way.
Sounds good.
Good?
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, very good, thank you.
I request to purchase CDBG property, 263 South Prospect Street. Margie Joe, our Community Development Manager, and Amanda Gregg, our Business and Community Development Finance Specialist.
It's a long one, huh?
Is that how you answer the phone?
What are you again?
I'm finance.
She can't even say that all.
Title in the city. For real.
Hello.
Hello. So this is a bit of a repeat from the work session last month regarding the sale of South Prospect Street property. We're now presenting for the sale of the other side of the duplex, which is 263 South Prospect. Again, a little bit of background. The property at 261, 263 South Prospect was purchased under the CDBG Home Ownership Program for the purpose of rehabilitating the property and placing it back in the hands of qualified home buyers. The use of CDBG funding requires that at least one of the units must be sold to a HUD income qualified home buyer, and we've received an eligible application for the unit at 263 from a qualified applicant. On a side note, I mentioned before, this means that both sides are actually being sold to HUD income qualified buyers, and our team's very excited and very happy about that. Our applicant has secured financing for the purchase and is prepared to move forward towards settlement upon approval of the sale by this body. And through this program, we also allow for a 2.5% commission to be paid to the buyer's agent, and that amount in this case will be $4,625. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Questions?
I think it's wonderful.
That's great.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Next up, request for request for proposal
There's some more.
RFP for upper floor housing grant program. Margie Joe, our Community Development Manager, and there's Doug Reeser. our
They're
economic
very
development
similar, the two programs are very similar, substantially just a few minor details that are different, so we thought we would just kind of present at the same time. So, since I'm on a roll, the city has been granted $200,000 in state community legacy funding towards creation of market rate upper floor housing within the city's sustainable communities boundary. The goal of this program is to provide matching funds for developers to adapt vacant or underutilized upper floors targeting 12 to 40-plus units per project in an effort to upgrade market conditions and quality of life in the city. Since 2014, the City of Hagerstown has partnered with developers on 6 upper floor housing projects, 4 of which were assisted by state community legacy funding. These projects resulted in the creation of 80 new units with a total investment of $12.4 million. Interested developers will be asked to provide a 1-to-1 match for any grant funding awarded, and the available monies may be awarded to a single project or to multiple projects depending on the project scale. The selected developer will be required to complete the project to the minimum development requirements of the city's Invest Hagerstown City Center Redevelopment Grant Program and the city's Partners in Economic Progress, or PEP program. This funding may be stacked with other development incentive programs offered by the city, but each must have unique receipts. That is to say, funding from any program must be matched by clearly separate expenses from any other program. The timeline that we're looking at, the deadline for the request for proposal submission will depend on the issuance of the RFP, but we are working to post them as soon as possible. The selection criteria. All applications will be reviewed by an RFP selection committee. Criteria for this ranking includes developer experience in residential development and renovation of older buildings, economic impact of the project, renovation budget, scale of the project and number of units created, size of the building, condition of the building, whether this rectifies code violations, the length of vacancy of the building, parking considerations, competitive negotiated sales property considerations, and any additional factors that may be in the best interest of the city. Once a proposal or proposals have been recommended by the RFP selection committee, staff will review the proposal with mayor and council to authorize a grant approval for the selected developer or developers. Staff does seek the authority to make minor administrative edits to the RFP as we work to get it posted. Was there anything you want to add?
I'll mention at the next item as it comes up.
You guys
Any
good?
questions?
I'm good.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for securing the grant.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have a request for proposal, RFP for Strategic Properties Grant Program. Doug Reeser, our Economic Development Manager.
Hi, Doug.
So Margie did a great job explaining it. These very much mirror each other. There's going to be some small differences between the two. But really, the strategic grant RFP is, again, $200,000 in state community legacy funding towards the rehabilitation of vacant and strategic properties within the city's sustainable communities boundaries. The goal of this program is to provide a matching funds for developers to adaptively reuse large vacant strategic properties as a means of accelerating efforts to lift property values and quality of life in the surrounding area. The program will encourage the redevelopment of strategic properties that present hurdles and obstacles that make reuse more challenging than the typical properties. The majority of what you just heard from Margie is going to exist in this RFP. The main difference is this is going to be for commercial, mixed use, and residential properties. So any property type is eligible for this type of grant. The selection criteria is going to be the same, roughly the same. We're looking at developer experience, including renovation of adaptive reuse of older buildings, economic impact, renovation budget, the scale of the project, and the number of units created if residential, the size of the building, condition of the building and rectifying code violations, length of vacancy, parking considerations, competitive negotiated sale property considerations, and any other factors that may be in the best interest of the city. So again, very much the same process. We're going to be looking to post the RFP at the same time as the upper floor housing. And again, the grants for the city as well as the upper floor housing can be combined. So all these can stack on top of each other as a layered investment opportunity for the right type of development. And we'd be bringing this back at the same time roughly as the upper floor housing and looking at reviewing this with the RFP committee, same process, and bringing it back to the mayor and council.
You guys good?
Yep. Yes.
All right. Thank you, Doug. Look at that, we're back on schedule, and Doug was out of here in 1 minute. Look at that.
Now batting?
Next, we have Invest Hagerstown City Center Redevelopment Grant Application, 105 through 107 North Potomac Street, Junior Fire Hall. We have Chris Simmerling, our Economic Development Specialist. Is that 105 through 107 or 105 and 107?
105 through 107. So, good evening, everyone. Here to talk about an Invest Hagerstown City Center redevelopment grant application for 105 to 107 North Potomac Street, commonly known as the Junior Fire Hall Building in the downtown, just right on the corner over here. going right into everything, it is a requested grant amount of up to $250,000 of the city center redevelopment grant, with current estimated total project cost of $642,602.44. Expected project start date will be fall 2023. They're ready to go with closing on their loan as soon as mayor and council would approve, if mayor and council does approve, and with an expected completion date of summer of next year. Review committee always provides an additional contingency, supply chain, contractors, what have you. So we're providing a deadline of March 31st of 2025. A little bit of a background of this project itself is it will be a historic restoration and redevelopment of that junior fire hall building. It would restore the historic features of the building and upgrade the core systems to PEP standards with HVAC, sprinkler system, and the addition of an elevator for ADA compliance. Once completed, applicant has plans for the creation of an authentic Italian cafe on the first floor. And the second floor would have an event center utilizing 3D projection mapping for historic tours, company events, and more. The 3D projection mapping, if you guys are familiar with that, the Van Gogh exhibit, for example, it would utilize the same technology. The developer did create a YouTube video to kind of go into the historic background of the property. If you have not had a chance to review that, it is included in the council packet as well. Upon project completion, an estimated 10 jobs is expected to be created as a result of this project. The property has been vacant as they're going through a DHCD loan process. And this redevelopment would essentially bring this back to life. As some additional notes on this project overall, the City Center redevelopment grant does require a 2-to-1 match from the developer. Current plans are about 80% complete with pending requirements with the state loan. But once those are completed, it is expected to meet or exceed that $750,000 unique anticipated project costs. Current demonstrated eligibility would bring it to about $215,000 if we look at the $642,000 I had mentioned earlier. And any additional expenses for maximum eligibility, essentially, with those additional quotes or any updates will be brought back to the review committee within 30 days of, within the next 30 days for review and approval on those sides as well. The project did also receive approval from the review committee for the Partners in Economic Progress, the PEP program, and is currently pending state approval for our fire suppression system grant. At this time, I can open up for any kind of questions.
I think it's great.
It's fantastic.
Good.
All right, thank you so much. If there's no questions or comments, we will bring it back to regular session.
Well, that's good news, these last 4 things we've just done, that was crazy.
Thank you.
Just keeps going.
All right. Now we got American Rescue Plan, ARPA, nonprofit funding recommendations. Michelle Hipper, our Chief Financial Officer, and no Brooke Garver.
It's just me. You get 50% tonight, so you might only get half the answers, okay? Actually, I'm returning, just to cover and go over the topic that we reviewed and started to look at last week. We did a nonprofit ARPA application process and a program that we approved last July. We made the application and the deadline for everybody to submit their information by September the 1st. When we developed the program and the guidelines, we went over what categories would be eligible for this nonprofit program. We covered things that were ineligible, not necessarily because they were a city preference or a city rule, but because there were things included in the IRS and some federal guidelines, like religious organizations, certain fire rescue, conflicts of interest, political bodies, things that were to be excluded. We made sure that some of the things that we required for people to submit in addition to the application was an IRS designation letter, a current certificate of good standing with the state of Maryland, project budget, and evidence of an active SAM.gov registration. And again, those not all of those things were because it was a city requirement or something that we at the city wanted, like the ActiveSAM.gov registration. That's a question I've been receiving a lot. That is an actual requirement that is in place for almost any type of federal money that you're receiving. So whether we receive the money here at the city and I use it and I pay a vendor like we did for our expanded camera system, those vendors also have to be registered on SAM.gov. So wherever I pass the money through, those organizations that are receiving it must have a SAM.gov. So that's why that requirement was included at this point in time. We developed a matrix that we included in the packets and that I had last week. And just as a reminder, overall, we were surprised. We received 55 applications in that time period, 42 that we did a scoring and reviewed because they met all of the eligibility requirements that we outlined in the nonprofit guidelines. Just as a final reminder, the proposals are meant to respond to the negative economic impact nonprofit organizations experienced due to the COVID-19 pandemic and were to fall within children and families, seniors, economic redevelopment, health and health disparities, transportation, mental health, and education. And those we actually established, but again, still are items that fall under eligible guidelines of the IRS. We did not pick things like premium pay or broadband or infrastructure, which would have been water, wastewater, stormwater. Again, those are definitions by IRS of what falls under infrastructure. We did not pick things like mortgage assistance, rental assistance, utility assistance, because quite frankly, those were not things that I heard from this body, or my perception was that wasn't what we were saying. Our focus wanted to be on the nonprofit sector for the $600,000 that we had still remaining that wasn't allocated at that time. So again, staff was provided a total not to exceed of $600,000 with a maximum amount of $50,000 per category for grant recipients. We did review last week that the subcommittee's recommendation was to do any organization that scored 40 or higher, and those 40 points or higher meant that we needed an additional $324,670 to fund 18 organizations. I reattached the scoring matrix just so that, again, I think one of the things in a lot of the discussion last week, and I think one of the things that's the most difficult is when you see the list of 55 applications and you see the names of the organizations that have applied, a lot of the organizations are very well known and we think, man, we know what that is. But when we actually read through the application process, a lot of times it was a surprise. It wasn't necessarily something that we would have been expecting. But again, making sure that you review all 55 and comparing them through this matrix. Because if you read 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, you might think, that sounds really good, until you compare it to the matrix and go through all 55. Because again, we followed this matrix and followed the process as it was outlined. Also attached, just again, was the same information that we included last time. It's a nice little chart where the top 40 in points was 18 organizations, and again, a total of $924,670. 19 through 42 was an additional 1.7 million in requests and ineligible applications listed at the bottom. And then a chart here on the back, which was new this week, which is what we talked about. Of the top that scored 40 or more, the breakdown between those eligible categories that we provided. So I'm just coming back. I was very surprised that I did not receive tremendous amount of questions or feedback from the city administrator or any of you, like that these organizations were all reaching out. We talked to one. but only one organization.
I thought I sent an email, maybe I didn't hit send, regarding the gatekeepers request.
Okay?
If I remember correctly, I don't have the packet from before, that there was a juvenile basketball program that was included in that request. I think that might be a duplication of what Envy is attempting to do. I think that is, I just want to clarify that, and how much funding was going to be allocated to that, because that is, I don't think that's, I know that's not the plan, that hasn't been discussed as the plan. Unless
Right.
I'd like to think I know, but.
So I do not think that the basketball program portion of what the gatekeepers was looking to do would necessarily be a duplication of the efforts of what I believe that our HPD staff is going to bring forth for Envy. Again, it's a little bit different, it's going to hit different demographics. And the 60,000 for gatekeepers was a little bit, was definitely more than just basketball. And we can go see if they broke out just that specific portion. Envy and HPD staff will come forward and present that, but yes. I
just wanna make sure
The
that-
last time that we talked, they were looking at doing like a cross-city basketball type initiative for those
Do they do
who.
juvenile work?
They are working now, just now, and I know this because of Helen Minty. Nasia works at the prison, my daughter works at the, not the prison, juvenile facility. They are now going into Western Maryland juvenile facility, and now are gonna actually teach that business of living within there too. And so I'm not sure of how, rounded out that is, but.
I know Gatekeepers is a part of the Envy initiative
Okay,
as coaches and.
okay.
Yes, so I want to make sure.
That it's not the
that
same
it's not-
demographic, that it's.
Correct, that is not the same program.
Okay.
That is not, there is something completely separate that they are working toward,
Is,
and how much of it.
Okay.
and I think that, I'm not sure, again, but I think that the Gatekeepers program around what they're supposed to be doing with basketball, that is not supposed to be juveniles.
Right.
Is my understanding, that this is re-entry, returning citizens that is not at-risk youth.
Yeah, just as long as it's not the same one,
It was,
not the same program.
all right, it was my understanding that it wasn't, but we can go back through. And that's definitely something that we can make sure that we, as we work through the individual subrecipient agreements, fine tune and come back and get with gatekeepers to ask.
Thank you.
So not same demographic or just not a basketball program at all, since we're looking
No.
to do a basketball
No,
program?
I just want to make, if it's a
Okay.
separate program, then it's a separate program. I just don't want to make sure that we're not duplicating the efforts, and that 25, or wherever, however much is allocated can, be spent or given to something else. That's all.
Okay.
I'm gonna let- Go ahead.
What?
I'm just gonna look down at this chart.
What?
I'm just look down at this chart while you talk, go
Yeah, you
ahead.
wanna look at mine?
No. I've already heard, I
So,
know, wait.
I just have a couple of questions. I don't know if they're questions, but I will say that I said to you, I could certainly be ready to, find agreement with a majority by this evening, and I can. A couple of things. On the 18 that were identified as, scoring at a level to be selected, and again, I didn't really want to look at the applications, but I didn't read anywhere within those purposes where they were broken out deliberately enough or identifiable enough to go beyond the 50,000. That's just my opinion.
Okay.
And so there wasn't any item within there where I said, and I said, okay, we're already sort of behind, or beyond what we identified. So that's the first thing, is I kind of looked at it and said, I just, you know, didn't feel that there was justification to go beyond that $50,000 figure that we identified, or that what, at least for the information that I received, that, you know, it was expansive enough to do that. So that's point one that I have. And so, you know, I don't have an interest in going above that. I guess I could be swayed. So, and then the second section of the chart, the application's not awarded. For lack of any better approach, I kind of said, okay, I could line through the ones where I said, you know, that isn't city-centric, you know, identifiable, and then I said, okay, you know, anybody that's way down on that scoring chart, I trust staff enough to say, you know, I don't want to rehash that. So to me, there were only a couple that sort of still stood out, and so because I didn't get a purpose sheet for any of those, I had a couple of questions, and one was on Beacon House. I didn't know what the request was.
And I'm gonna be brutally honest. So Beacon House in their application, the words for what the request was versus the breakout when you look at their budget don't match. And so, for instance, in the words, it seemed like they were looking to purchase 2 additional vans for transportation. But when you look at their budget and how it was broken out and the things that they were requesting, there was no purchase of equipment. It was more, and it talked about training of staff, but whenever you looked at the budget, some of it was salaries for staff, but a lot of it under the request for city funds was contracted staff. So we didn't know
Okay.
if they needed to hire additional contracted staff, if they were looking to hire additional employees. And then when they talked about training, it almost seemed like in 2 different, and those are things that we can, again, work through with them if we're moving on down the list and are gonna take everybody scored, I don't know, 37.5 and higher. But we couldn't differentiate, like, going forward. So if we're helping to cover existing salaries for existing
I got it.
staff or hiring additional contracted staff, what would they do next year? And how would they keep this going?
Okay.
Because it didn't, in their application, it didn't sound like it was like some new specific program that they were looking to do a trial and then, right? It was more, yeah.
But I believe last week there was a Facebook announcement that Beacon House dissolved, so,
Okay.
yeah,
Well, that makes that question
I think it was
easy
last
then.
week.
I didn't want to stop you.
So the second one was, I see 2 for CASA. And so for me, I just picked anybody above 30. I'm just
That's
gonna say
fine.
that. And so there were 4 out of that above 30 that I could look at it and say, so Beacon House, that's out, that's fine, that's good to know. Not that they're folded. The second was, there was a CASA Western Maryland and a CASA Inc. Are they the same or 2
No.
different organizations?
So they have 2 separate
Okay.
unique identifier numbers, and they had 2 separate
Okay.
IRS designation letters. And so like CASA of Western Maryland is for all of Western Maryland, but
Okay, so
they
I'm gonna
were,
park that one aside.
okay.
What was CASA Inc.'s request?
Theirs
Purpose.
was for HVAC replacement project that they are working on. They've done phase 1 and phase 2.
Uh-huh.
This would be looking for some monies for the 3rd phase, the
Okay.
HVAC at Mulberry House.
Okay.
Mulberry House HVAC replacement.
Okay. And then, what was the request of the Washington County Museum of Fine Arts?
Okay, so the Washington
That was
County.
a big number.
Washington County Museum of Fine Arts. So of the 4 that you just mentioned, Washington County Museum of Fine Arts is one of the 4 that do receive a general fund agency contribution annually from the city of Hagerstown, $40,500. Now, that does not preclude them from receiving additional funding. But when we look through the application and we're weighting it in this matrix, it was to enhance an existing program to help drive tourism numbers and get back to pre-pandemic tourism numbers. It mentioned in here that the exhibits and everything was already, like, they've already contracted for the exhibitions and for the educational programming. but they were just looking for this to help cover costs that they've already. So when we reviewed this, it wasn't, with this money, they could do a new exhibit, or they could bring in, like, and I'm just gonna pick, like, for instance, Discovery Station. It was very specific about going into schools or a certain demographic or a certain population. Museum of Fine Arts, and again, not that there's anything wrong with that, it was a wider demographic. Some of it would be local people, right? But again, tourism, driving tourism and bringing other people in. So it wasn't necessarily that they were expanding anything, it was doing what they're currently doing, which is kind of already covered in our general fund agency contributions.
Okay.
Again, those aren't reasons for the score that it received. It was based on the rest of what was in the application in the actual matrix.
Going down to the third chart, there are only two that I had question about.
Okay,
One, because we received communication, and that was Hark.
okay.
And two things on that. One, I understand and agree with the general tenets of that exclusion. But again, I didn't see the applications. I think that was helpful for me because it appears what they were asking for was to address food insecurity, which was the Micah's
Micah's
Backpack
Backpack.
program. And so I want to understand why we're not able to differentiate that separation.
Because all of their attachments and everything that they have out there goes back to the religious organization. So if we reviewed theirs, then there was one or two others that had reached out, and when we had the ineligible in the guidelines, and it said, you know, it excludes religious organizations, the fire services, and a lot of the others, and conflict of interest section, then they said they weren't even going to apply. So even though Micah's Backpack might not be religious-based, it was the organization that was applying, and it was the only way we could differentiate. I will tell you personally, every single one of us, all 6 of us, struggled with that.
Okay, I don't struggle with that.
I don't either.
Yeah.
For me, and here's why. So I went back to the code,
No.
the final rule.
Okay,
And it clearly says in the final rule, as it applies to food insecurity, that that's one of the approvable items.
Okay.
And so, not seeing the application, but getting the communication that that's the specific purpose, I feel like I'm able to sit here and say, I'm as okay with that as if you told me CASA was about the vans, or not, being about the vans, or CASA was about the HVAC, you know what I mean?
Right.
And not operational. And so I'm just, that's my 2 cents on that particular application. And I don't know which is which, because there's a 1 and a 2 listed here.
right, only one of them was Micah's Backpack.
That's correct. And so I'd be okay as it applies to addressing the food insecurity issue.
And for the Hark, you know, with Micah's Backpack, it is, you know, distributed to the churches that go to the schools. So, and the volunteers from all over the county come in to distribute that food.
Right.
So, I see it a little bit differently.
And I think that even their after-school program, I know it's Hagerstown Area Religious Council, but they facilitate, as a nonprofit, I think a 501c3 and a 504 something, I think, that's not a nonprofit status, but they help facilitate these things to happen within religious institutions that then reach the people that need it. And even with them talking about the after-school program at different areas, like for once, Outerbind would have a central location for kids, and I just thought, it's not gonna be a church-based, it's gonna be through the school system. And so hearing that even from them was kind of like, that would have been perfect, especially for this area right here that does not have a hub, to have an after-school program that is, you know, at Outerbind that's not religious.
So again, here's what I could say. We went through the program, and we've identified and scored and ranked there have been other organizations that this administration, well within the IRS guidelines of what is eligible, have given monies towards, right? Brothers United Who Care. That didn't come through the specific nonprofit application. And I'm not saying go back and one off, but I think, honestly, for us to evaluate it now after we've already ranked everybody is going to be very difficult. It's going to put employees in a difficult position. Because are we going to try to score them high so that they get higher than 4? Because when we evaluated and ranked everybody else, we didn't go into that with any thought process on how much we were going to break this out, or how much money each individual group had asked for and how much we had.
So how did you decide that, like, United Way wouldn't get the 50,000, they would get the 100? How did staff decide that?
So with their request, right, with the transportation, so as they outlined it, it was more than just a transportation. They're hitting different demographics for different things.
I just pulled them, I wasn't, just
So,
seeing that
and what
first,
we had
so
said in our
just asking a
guidelines
question.
was that a group was eligible up to 50,000 per category. So if you look here on the back, for instance, so let's do that. If you look at the United Way, within their application, as you read through it, and as they indicated and marked, it's children and families, it's health and health disparities, it's transportation, it's mental health. So it's across 4, and it's doing slightly different things across those demographics for the reasons why you're transporting them or where you're taking them to and why, right?
Thank you. Sorry if you already answered that.
No, I don't think I did.
Thank you.
The other one in the third chart is the Horizon Goodwill.
Yes.
And I see that exclusion, and, I'm not naive enough, to say I don't understand. But here's my differentiation, maybe the part that I struggle with in the simplicity of reviewing the documentation, is this funding is not coming from the local or the city or the state level. Unlike smaller jurisdictions whose funding went through the state comptroller's office and then
Right.
down to the jurisdictions, funding for large jurisdictions came directly from the federal government.
Or entitled jurisdictions.
Correct.
Right, and so that's what I'm saying, like,
Doesn't have to be a large one.
Right.
I understand that it may be a state elected official's name on the application, but we're not dealing with state funds. I guess that's how I look at it.
And I understand exactly what you're saying. For us and as staff and as the finance person, I went back to the guidelines and I was like, this is what it says. And so then I pull the application in front of me and we look at the names, we look at who signs, and we're all about consistency. We have already, so for the guidelines, right, it's pretty clear. And it doesn't differentiate in the guidelines in the final rule for those who received their funds through the state and down versus those who received it directly, like the city of Hagerstown for those titled communities. And we have already had another instance where we have denied ARPA funding for another program for a very eligible project for the same conflict of interest reason. So as a staff member, I have to be all about consistency and I have to be all about following that final rule. And it's very difficult, yes, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I'd just say that, I think the whole purpose of this program was to try and put some fairness behind how we granted these funds. And I'm going to have heartburn forever that there's 55 organizations or more potentially that could have applied for this money and only 18 are going to get some. But I feel satisfied that you guys at least applied a fair, data-driven way to gauge this. So for me, I'm still going to have heartburn about some of these organizations that didn't get funding, but I'm good with this myself.
So, for me, knowing that there are ones within categories 2 and 3 that I would support some funding for, and that we've went 75% over what we identified. And there are entities in that top tier that you've identified for more than that amount. And I can't find things in there, you know, at least from my review, to I don't know, justify that, while there are 4, I think, you know, in those other categories that I think have due reconsideration. I'm not above the 50, you know.
So for instance, so to put this in perspective, so United Way, where they did one application and they asked for 100,000, and in their application, they segregated things out. Separately, we had Girls Inc.
Right, which I picked one for,
Who,
not 2.
who, instead of doing it all within one application, did it as 2 separate applications and 2 separate programs. So you're saying any one organization, 50,000?
I just didn't read anything where I looked at the entirety of it and said, you know, I couldn't, I don't know, include those specific other ones, you know, within that consideration.
So
That's me.
are you saying that, like, for instance, Girls Inc. is only one application at 50,000? And the other, or are you saying
Yeah.
that,
That is what I'm saying.
are you also saying that Boys and Girls Club, to max it out at 50,000 and not 100?
Both.
You're saying both
That's
of those
what-
things?
Yes, I am.
With United Way, or not
50,000.
with United Way, because that's,
And I felt that in review, and like I said, I didn't see the apps, so I can't verify this. I have to go on the purpose that was provided. I feel like in the vast majority, they were expansions of programmatic offerings,
Somewhere.
so.
The United Way was new. Ride United was new for the Alice demographic.
I personally would be fine with one application per organization and going above the 50,000 if requested. That's just,
Were we clear in the guidelines? Because I know we said 50,000 per category. Were we
We
clear
did.
as to how
We
that was to
actually
be?
communicated when they asked that it was, we didn't care if they did 2 applications or put it within one,
See,
as long
and-
as they clearly had differentiation.
In that case, I struggle with allowing, say, I'm not picking on any particular organization, but in that case, I would struggle with, say, giving the United Way 100,000 because they did it all in one versus giving Girls Inc. only 50 because they put it in 2 separate, if we didn't tell them to do one or the other. I would struggle with that a bit.
I'm fine as it is presented, so that's a.
I'm also fine as
different-
presented if
4
that's the
different,
majority. Yeah.
Okay. So what we will do, so next steps, we will send out award letters. And again, keeping in mind that there's still money and funding if we need to reprioritize. But our next steps for this specific program will be that we will send out a memo for every 55 applications. So if you were Girls Inc. and you sent in 5 different applications, you're going to get 5 different memos from us, so that we are communicating just like we do with everybody for the agency contributions. And then we'll get them out this month. Separately, we will come back in December for the subrecipient agreements for the 18. What we are hoping to do, we would have 18 separate subrecipient agreements with 18 separate resolutions and one motion sheet, so that there be one vote and do this all as one,
oh, don't take
Right?
the fun out of it.
and do a chart. Otherwise, Otherwise, you're
fun
doing
out.
18 separate, I mean, and we've talked, we've done it similarly for some other things, and since it's one program, and if you're okay with that, we're also gonna recommend that the five, I think, that's gonna be for the ARPA, Restaurant Ready, be handled in that same manner. But yes, it was, look, some of these applications, a lot of these applications, it's all very telling of the need in the community and the services that are being provided to our community.
Did you notice a pattern of like the need, like what was the one thing that if you could sum up one or two things that the community as a whole was needing from every organization, what would you say it was?
The staff and the resources.
Yep,
And it's very different, it's very difficult.
hands down.
And that's something that wasn't even to be.
And I don't,
Wow.
and,
the second thing.
and I don't wanna say that it's, and
Sustainability.
I don't wanna say
To
it's,
be able to sustain it.
And
I
was
don't
thinking
even wanna say
children
it was
and
like
families.
the
Same
mental, I'm not gonna put it in a mental health category, because it's broader than that. It's the whole socialization. Like, we were so isolated for so long, and so there's so many needs. A lot see it through the schools, a lot see it through the elderly, you see it at the nursing homes, you see it everywhere. You see it as people who worked remotely that are now being asked to physically come back on site to work, that they're struggling with that. I struggle with it now, just seeing the drivers on the highway thinking, where did they get their license from? But I think,
During COVID, that's how they got it.
yeah.
Online.
So thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, staff, for going through these. We'd probably still be going through them right now
Oh, my God.
if it was up to us.
We 100
Feeling all of it.
Yeah, like what-
Thank you. All right. Summit Avenue Railroad Crossing, Jim Mender. I didn't like this memo.
Good afternoon.
Made me upset.
In November of 2022, and then again in January of this year, Rodney came to you to talk about the railroad crossings at Park Circle. And there are actually two different issues there. One is the very poor condition of the crossings, especially at Walnut Street, but also Virginia Avenue is not great. So that's one issue, getting those crossings upgraded. The other issue was we have applied since 2015, we've been working on the Marsh Run Trail project, which is a multi-use trail that would run from basically Bester Elementary over to Summit Avenue, and it would involve putting a tunnel under that CSX railroad line and crossing under it to make that connection. And we had been working with a consultant, using grant funds to design that trail. And as part of that process, we would have to submit the plans to CSX for their comments on the design. And so we had submitted plans in, I believe, in 2020, and didn't receive any comments from CSX. They were withholding comments. And then, as Rodney pointed out, that's a little bit later, that's when they started sending us proposed maintenance agreements for these crossings, and basically saying, city, you need to pay to maintain these three railroad crossings at Park Circle. Here's what it's gonna cost, and the way those maintenance agreements were structured, it put all the liability on the city, and basically took any liability for anything away from CSX. So Rodney came to you in January, presented all that information. He presented results of a survey that we had done of the neighborhood, especially south of Memorial Boulevard, where we asked the residents' feelings about closing that Summit Avenue crossing. And those results were split fairly evenly, but because of the maintenance agreement issue and other things, Rodney's recommendation to council was, we don't want to move ahead with, we don't want to move ahead with closing this crossing because we're at a standstill. So since January, two things have changed. The personnel at CSX who are involved with this project are different now. So I think that we have a little bit more of an open ear from them to work on both of these issues. The other thing that came into play was Hogan Development Company. They own land off of Sharpsburg Pike, and they have been talking with CSX about getting another crossing across that same railroad line down in that area. And CSX's typical response is, you close 3 other crossings, we'll let you put a new crossing in. Somehow Hogan has managed, my understanding is to get 2 other crossings closed, or they have the ability to close them. And so Hogan was motivated to reach out to the city and say, if we can free things up with CSX, would you be willing to reconsider closing the Summit Avenue crossing? And so that led to some back and forth with CSX and with Hogan, and then Scott and I ended up on a meeting with CSX. And actually Rodney even joined us because he knew the history. And CSX has basically said to us that if we agree at some point to close the Summit Avenue crossing to vehicular traffic, they will free up the funds to repair those crossings at Park Circle, and they will also release their comments on the Marsh Run Trail and let us go ahead with that project.
Wow, I read this.
So the reason that I'm here tonight is we would have to do a number of things to start this back up on the Marsh Run Trail. We would need to reengage our consultants. I need to reach out to the state grant agencies that have given us money and make sure that they're okay with it. And it's pretty unanimous in January that the council agreed, don't move ahead with this. And I don't even want to start this process up, moving ahead again, if the council is not comfortable with the idea of closing that Summit Avenue crossing. I will say that the one concern with closing Summit Avenue crossing in my mind is Columbia Gas. They are located on Sycamore Street. And typically, if they want to go south from their facility, they typically use Sycamore Street to get over to Summit Avenue and then get into the south end. If we close the Summit Avenue crossing, they are not going to be able to do that. They would have to go out Sycamore Street to Potomac and go down Potomac and into the south end. That is not so much an issue for their regular service vehicles. Their issue, though, is that they get tractor-trailer deliveries of pipe and other materials. And it's very difficult for trucks to make that turn off of Potomac onto Sycamore to come in from that direction. They almost always come in on the Summit Avenue end and turn onto Sycamore. It's not as tight a turn for them. So they certainly expressed concerns that this would have an impact on their operations. So that would be something to consider. I think to me, that's the main negative that would have to be considered if we close that crossing. So, like I said, I guess I'm looking for some direction from the council. Is this something that we would want to consider as we move forward? Or the funding for that is actually federal funding that flows into the state highway administration. But before the state was sort of in the same situation we were. Until CSX signed off on doing those upgrades, that money has just been sitting there. And there's a danger that money is going to get reprogrammed somewhere else.
And just reiterate, that line that crosses, the line that would be closed, serves what and how often?
The only customer on that line is Conservit, the recycling facility down off of Sharpsburg Pike. And there are 2 trains a week. I believe a train on Tuesday and a train on Thursday.
What would they do?
So the plan is, if we went ahead with the railroad crossing is going to stay open. So the railroad one would stay open if we close the vehicular crossing. If we build the Marsh Run Trail, at some point, we're going to have to build that tunnel. And CSX is in agreement that if we schedule it right and stage it right and can do it basically over a 3-day period, they would be willing to approve that. And our consultant has been talking with contractors, and they think that part of the construction is doable in a short time frame. So I think it's more feasible. Now, that the other part of the Marsh Run Trail is we had funding allocated for the design of this thing. We're going to have to reapply then, once we have an approved design, for the construction funding. And there's going to be a pretty, at least a 20% match from the city, to move ahead. So it may be that we get approval of the plans, but then we're not going to be in a position to actually go ahead with the project for, several years until we can figure out that part of the funding source.
doing this doesn't lock us into some sort of a maintenance agreement with CSX if we agreed to have those railroad crossings repaired. If we agreed to this and they repaired them, that doesn't lock us into some sort of a maintenance agreement, does it?
They did not bring that up in the meeting. I think my next step, if the council tonight says, yes, we would consider this, my next step is to actually send CSX a letter and get all these points in writing, just so that we don't get stuck somewhere down the road.
What did public safety have to say? Police and fire response.
They, they never like to have a street closed, they don't like their access limited, but in this case, they felt that there were still adequate ways to reach properties on both sides, just looking at where they would be responding from. So I wouldn't say they were excited about it, but they didn't say, no, you can't do it.
Do we know what the property on Sycamore Street, and I'm assuming planning may have some estimation of what the development potential is left for that property? Because, we're talking about Columbia Gas today, but if I'm clear on where this is, Sycamore Street does have property that is not densely developed at this time.
Some of it. On the north side of of Sycamore, there are some bigger commercial uses already there. Some of the bigger warehouses that also have frontage on Lee Street and have access to Lee Street. I think the piece that you're referring to is on the south side of Sycamore, same side as Columbia Gas. And I don't remember offhand how far from the Columbia Gas building out towards Summit they own. I don't know, Kathy, if you would know if they own the rest of that property over to Summit.
Half that block.
That scrubby area?
Yeah.
That, on old Sanborn maps, shows up as central chemical sulfite piles. So I think someone is deliberately leaving that land fallow.
Yeah. Okay.
A lot of cats live there now.
I just don't want to be 300 apartments that suddenly have to empty out onto Potomac every day.
Right.
I had 30 plus cross in front of me the other night.
30? Maybe call the.
All kinds of feral cats in that area.
There they stay.
I didn't like that cemetery.
Well, the number of complaints we get for those two railroads, we gotta do something.
Yeah.
You
guys okay with them?
Railroads have owned these decisions since the dawn of the nation, right?
Yeah, I think that, honestly, I think that we got in this situation because it was because of the person that was in charge of this at CSX at that
Sometimes
time.
it helps when new people come.
Because
Yeah.
it seems like we've got, the person that we talked with on that meeting, was careful, but I think was more reasonable than the predecessor.
I have one last question, because we really didn't address it. Closing crossings have a benefit, right? They have a tangible benefit. We're going to agree to this closing to the tangible benefit of a private property owner that's developing property outside of the city limits. I'm just curious why we're freely giving up that tangible benefit, given the number of crossings that we have in the city, to the development of property outside of the city, and not holding that, right? Because we can bank that and use it in whatever fashion we may need for future crossings conflict. So I'm just curious why we're simply giving that over, because at the end of the day, we're negotiating this process with CSX. I'm just curious what the interest in this process is of this private party that is going to be the direct recipient of this closure at no benefit to the city. In other words, we can accomplish this without that, right?
Sure, we could.
We're just giving
We
it
could-
away.
Yeah.
Why are we doing that?
Why are we doing that?
I'm just curious.
I mean, I think it's a legitimate question, and that's something that we could raise with the development company.
Well, I mean, I just don't see, I don't know why we are.
I just want the railroads repaired.
Well, I think.
But we can do that with CSX, get the
Yeah.
closure, agree to the closure.
Well,
they
but
agree
only,
to this, we
only at
agree
the
to
possible
maintenance.
expense of having to maintain that, or having to do it ourselves and maintain it ourselves.
No. What I'm saying is, we're agreeing to close Summit, right?
Right.
Which gets rid of that crossing, right? Which is a bankable credit, okay? They're agreeing to fix the two crossings because we're willing to give up the other crossing. That's it. Why are we handing that off?
Couldn't help it.
They're actually back there laughing
We're back there doing eeny, meeny, miny, mo about
of who's coming.
this property is reachable by the city.
Okay, which means they'll be obligated to annex. We don't need to give them a free crossing to make that happen.
So we'll be gaining a crossing on that property
Well,
when
I
it's
guess
annexed,
they
is that what
need
you're
the
saying?
crossing for them to move forward with their project.
But then it would become our crossing at some point later? Is that what you're saying?
They need a crossing, I guess.
They need a
No,
crossing.
they need the
access.
abandonment, which means we're
Well,
gonna
they
be
need
dealing with
these
another crossing in the
abandonments
city
so
once it's
they
annexed.
can get a crossing so
That's
that
right.
their property's accessible.
So we'll be inheriting that crossing.
Right. Is that what you're
If annexed.
saying? In theory, if we were to annex that later on, we would gain that crossing?
It's a whole issue about roads, that's.
Right, another obligation.
It is.
If we took on the responsibility of the road it crossed, yes.
I don't understand what the third party has in this process. We're simply finalizing a negotiation with CSX.
Yeah, I think it was that the third party did this facilitation that got talking to the right people with CSX that got this moving.
Okay.
That's what I get.
Relationships.
Yeah, I don't think CSX sparked this activity.
No.
Yeah, okay.
I was one of those Summit Avenue residents that would love to see that street closed. For two reasons. One, it's a shortcut from Wilson Boulevard to downtown, not having stoplights.
Yeah, I'm good with all of that.
Yeah.
I just don't know
It
why
could be
we're
parking
giving up
for-
a tangible credit.
Parking for the new park, that kind of thing.
We should.
But kind of like from Field of Dreams, well, what's in it for me? You know, we don't know.
We answered your question.
I think so. I think the next step is let me put this in writing to CSX.
Yep.
make sure
I just don't want the answer to be that CSX is willing to do this under the condition we give it to them. Give it to that private developer. Because all that says to me is then politics has made this decision.
No, it's a good point. It's a
And
very
that,
good
like,
point.
that just doesn't sit well
It's a very good point.
here with me.
You'll have heartburn.
Or then we just say it for what it is.
But if those railroads gets repaired, we should have a celebration.
You're so excited.
I'm so excited. It just
Yeah.
feels like my tires are gonna fall off.
Walnut is
Pennsylvania
just
Avenue too.
a travesty.
Well, Potomac is just about as bad, down by the hardware store, down by Howard Street.
100%
And coming
correct.
up,
Yeah.
100% correct.
coming up over
Same
Pennsylvania
line?
Avenue.
Not the same
Yep,
line. Same line?
Same line.
I guess you're right.
Which one is Pennsylvania Avenue, the terrace? Because that, I hit so hard that, yeah.
We're asking a lot of CSX, trust me.
That's actually a different line that sees much more frequent traffic.
Yeah.
This line that cuts by, through City Park and then down
ain't
to
green
Sharpsburg
either.
Pike is barely used, so.
Thank you, Jim.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
When was the last time we did this long, you guys?
It's good stuff.
I know. I'm like, I'm loving it. Welcome, Matt. Maryland Department of the Environment, MDE funding, wastewater division.
No, you missed
No,
one.
you missed one.
Go one up,
Oh.
620.
Oh, man, why would I do that? Aviation Resources Delaware Inc., ARDI, Agreement for Community Water Tank. Nancy, our Director of Utilities, how dare I try to skip over one of your illustrious,
And Ashley Newcomer,
Ashley Newcomer.
financial manager.
Is that your name, Newcomer, or are you just the newcomer?
A little of both.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I was going to introduce Ashley, but Ashley is, of course, our financial manager, and she's been with us since now you're retired. So we've talked about this for a number of years, especially during budget preparation. This $101,000 that's been sitting in the water fund since 2004. And I guess the bottom line is that the only thing we can use this money for is to build a water tank out in the vicinity of Sierra Nevada Corporation, which was previously ARDI. And that in and of itself presents some challenges for us. Water quality specifically. We have a hard time maintaining the chlorine residual, requires a lot of flushing, and the more water you have in storage, the harder it is to maintain that residual. We, all summer long, usually beginning before the 4th of July and goes through August or September, we are consistently taking a tank off a line, putting it back online, taking it offline, draining it, putting it back online. So from an operational standpoint, building a tank is not ideal. It may have been a good idea in 2004. What would be ideal that we're not allowed to use this money for is pump station. Another way to get, higher pressures, more pressure, more volume where you need it, not in the form of stored water. Just as a point of reference, the Henson tank holds 175,000 gallons, and the Showalter tank holds 75,000 gallons. And I asked Ashley to work with legal counsel to review the agreements, to confirm what we could and couldn't do, and then see what would kind of make a decision that we thought would be, I'm going to say to some extent, in our best interest. We do realize we would be returning $101,000, but the bottom line is, from 2004 to now, we haven't been able to use the $101,000, and we at least, depending on how much interest the money gains, the staff time involved sometimes to return a few bucks and sometimes a little more than that. So with that, I'm going to let Ashley talk about the recommendations from legal counsel and so forth.
Like Nancy said, around budget time, we'd had this restricted cash of $101,000 since 2004, and Michelle Hepburn has always said to us, if we're not able to use it for its intended purpose, we really should work with legal counsel to return it. And so I reached out to Jason Morton, city attorney, and he said, let's first make contact with ARDI. And I found some old emails, but believe it or not, those people are no longer employed with ARDI. And so I reached out actually to Sierra Nevada, and I was put in contact with a gentleman named Brandon Main. He's their vice president of corporate real estate, and he was agreeable and agreed to be my point of contact. And so I linked together Jason and Mr. Main, and they prepared an agreement which is acceptable to both parties, and we're just here now tonight to ask for your blessing.
I'm good. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Connection. Way to go.
Good job.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you.
Yes.
Nice to meet you.
She'll be with us during, you see more of her during budget, so.
I'm recusing myself from the next item. And I'm good with the last item. I'm recusing myself from this item. I'm obviously involved in the same application process.
Oh, yes, you
So
are.
it probably doesn't benefit me to participate in the discussion.
Think about that.
And we're competing for funds, right?
Yes,
So,
I would agree. Thank you.
That's a cage match, then.
Her request is pretty small.
Have a good night. Safe travels. Next up, Maryland Department of the Environment, MDE funding, wastewater division, Nancy
And this is
Tyler
Tyler
Puffenberger.
Puffenberger. He is our Deputy Director of Water and Wastewater, and you'll be seeing more of Tyler and perhaps a little less of me. But I won't, I'll make sure he's ready. So in any case, kind of how just we're dividing things is I'm taking the administrative side of things and he's taking the operational side of things. So I'll talk a little bit about administratively, and then I'm going to turn it over to Tyler operationally for the importance of this money. And I'm sure you guys remember our conversation earlier this year when we reported that we were not ranked and rated favorably by MDE on our wastewater application. Application was in the $37 million price range. And Scott and I, as well as some other folks on city staff, met with Maryland Department of the Environment, the secretary, and this come up. And, I made a comment about the disparity that, how difficult it is competing with the really big boys, the Baltimore City, Montgomery County, and so forth for these wastewater funds. And I couldn't understand when we had worked so hard to touch base on, or to meet as many criteria as we possibly could, looking at energy conservation, potable water conservation, looking at the environmental impacts, looking at thermal, climate resiliency, thermal pollution, and that sort of thing, that I couldn't understand why we didn't rank and rate favorably. And lo and behold, we thought it was for growth. And so I, explained to them that it was absolutely not for growth. And so several months later, we received this letter saying, here's $20 million in loan money. From a administrative capacity standpoint, our plant is currently, it's an 8 MGD plant. We run at about 6 MGD. Our phosphorus concentration limit is 0.3. We're currently at 0.26. And what that means is that if we were running at 8 MGD and we had a wet year, we could not comply with our permit. And that's essentially what we conveyed to MDE. And there's new technologies available since our plant was upgraded that can actually get the phosphorus concentration down to 0.15 parts per million or milligrams per liter. And so from a capacity standpoint and looking at economic development and that sort of thing and what we can and can't do, it's really important to get our nutrient treatment as low as we can get it so that we can run the plant in a manner that allows us to do what we need to do from an economic development perspective, but also from looking at, that environmental responsibility that we have through an MPDS permit. And, I have to also thank everyone, because what helps with us being able to do this is Mayor and Council continue to support us in approving funding for our rate study to keep our rates current and our model current. You've approved funding for the local limit study, our Headworks loading study, cybersecurity, and for capacity management, all within the last couple of years, which all roll into our ability to do these big projects. So, I want to make sure that, we thank you for supporting us as we bring these projects forward, because I'm sure all of that has played a role in MDE making this offer for the funding. And with that, I'm going to let Tyler talk a little bit about the condition of the wastewater plant and to include emergency authorization that you'll
consent item that you'll see next month for emergency authorization for something that blew apart. So,
Yeah, the wastewater plant's deteriorating. It's been in deteriorating condition for quite some time now. There's many things that this funding, we could use it for with many pieces of equipment. I have a breakdown here of just all the different things in different buildings, communication loops that we have, that water gets into our conduits, and every time a big storm, we have power issues. We've had some catastrophes that we've had to come in and fix because of a lot of this stuff that's been going on. But yeah, you guys have seen some of these emergency items being pushed through, and that's part of this whole big list we're trying to slowly piece together, and this funding will be able to help us do a completely revamp of a lot of these areas.
we're going to look primarily for this project at, of course, the nutrient removal, but we're also going to look at the electrical mechanical, which are our pumps and our motors and our SCADA and that sort of thing that keep us running. And which will address many of the problems that Tyler's been dealing with, and that the consent agenda tonight are, all of the wastewater items that are things that have exceeded their useful life, and we're trying to get things in place before they break, so we don't have those outages, those catastrophes associated with outages. So we're kind of asking two things. One, that you give us the nod of approval to let MDE know that, yes, we definitely want this pot of money. And the other thing we're asking is, because of the time constraints associated with being construction ready, we'd also like permission to work directly with Black & Veatch. They were our engineer for BNR and ENR upgrades. They know our facility better than anybody. And when you're talking about an upgrade of this magnitude, there's a lot of advantages to having somebody on your engineer to have that background. Of course, we've also been working with them, as you well know, with the pelletizer and doing that new contract and trying to get the pelletizer facility where we need it to be, and it's been a huge asset. The list of items, the rate study, local limits, headwork, cybersecurity, capacity management, Black & Veatch has been the engineering firm doing all of that work as well. So, we'd like permission to put a proposal together and bring it before mayor and council, probably in January, for them to be the engineering firm that does the planning, the design, the bidding, and the construction phase work, to bring the plant, at least part of the plant, up to current standards. And of course, Black & Veatch will be working with us on the subsequent funding application for the additional money that would be needed that we identified in the original funding application. So we have those two asks before you this evening.
Yes to both.
Yep, I say absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
This is a good project for Tyler.
Excellent.
Good, Tyler. Have fun.
How about it? Hagerstown Police Department contractual overtime, Chief Paul Joey Kuiper. Dun, 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 dun.
Yes. We're saying yes.
Joey Boy.
Theme music.
You again, so, this is a pretty easy one. So we are trying to stay in line with what the state and the county do for their contractual overtime rates. So the overtime rate that they currently use is the same. It's $84.60 an hour when someone wants us to do overtime for them. So it's a private entity. It's not a city overtime rate for city functions. It's not for, covering the shifts. It's when a store wants to have us out for Black Friday security that they pay the city, and then that we would charge this rate. So it's currently at, and the reason why I'm here is because it's in the budget book. And the way the language is in the budget book, we need to get approval from you guys to agree to change that, and that would happen here tonight. We don't have to come back for another vote, so it would happen here. So It's currently billed at the top rate, police officer's rate of $59.93. And the recipients are billed 115% of that rate, which is $68.92 currently. After, if you guys give approval tonight, it'll go up to $84.50 an hour, and the officers will make $65 an hour. So they'll get an increase in their overtime rate, but it covers the administrative functions and everything that has to go with that overtime rate as well. Again, this stays in par with our counterparts. We do a lot of joint overtimes with them sometimes, sporting events for the schools, things like that. And it's not real keen when our guys are making less money than the guy that's staying with a different uniform next to them. So,
I'm absolutely okay with this.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
all right, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. City Administrator.
All right. Thank you for indulging us tonight. We had a lot of trying to get young faces at the table. Ashley, Tyler, Steve Lohr, those.
Awesome.
So we appreciate you allowing us to get some of this stuff on the record, even though a lot of us, our eyes glaze over on it. It's still nice that they're able to come up and address the council. Had a great meeting with Hayek Group last night, telling them a little bit about city government, talking about eyes glazing over. But another fantastic group of kids, and it's such a great program I think that we have here, and look forward to working more with those kids. I think here in the chamber, hearing Audubon Basu talk the other night, just goes to show how prime this region is for development. Not just commercial development, not just warehouse commercial development, but manufacturing and then residential housing. And we have got to get to a solution on some of the problems that we have to not turn that business away. Because when it's gone, and it won't come back. And so I'm sure there were a lot of eye rolls when that conversation was had, but it's true. And those of us that are in it day to day see it. And we understand what we need to do, and we just need to have some cooperation. Repeating record here, it's another big weekend in town. Friday night is Holly Fest at the Maryland Theater. Starts at 7 o'clock. Before then, you can get photos with the Grouchy Green Neighbor, which is really the Grinch, at 6:15. Also at the Maryland Theater, 6:15 to 6:50. The tree lighting will be Saturday, and there's a cool story about this tree, is that we have a councilman back in the 80s, William King, who passed away not too long ago, but his wife is Joanne King, and she has had this tree in her yard that she has been pruning to make it worthy of being the downtown Christmas tree. And that is what you see on the square. It's super, and her name is Joanne King, and we cannot thank her enough, and thank her husband for the service he gave to the city. His picture is out in the hallway, so you can see him out there. We showed the Hayek kids that last night. Just a really cool story. So thank you, Mrs. King, for being a huge part of our Christmas in town. We also have, that's at 5 o'clock, the Christmas Market, Handmade, Hagerstown on South Potomac Street from 2 to 6:30, which again is another Brittany Arizmendi event, of which she just, she kills it. And it brings a lot of folks downtown. It's going to be should be a nice weekend for it, and I look forward to seeing folks down. And again, sorry for the late hour, but we appreciate the discussion and the interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman McIntyre.
I don't have much. Thanks for sharing that story about the tree.
Super cool.
That's incredible. Is she in the area?
Yeah.
Is she able to come to the
I
Christmas
think
tree
they're
lighting?
trying, I think that is part of the deal for Saturday evening.
And speaking of the Christmas tree lighting, last year, we tried really hard to make it very ADA accessible. And we were kind of late to be doing that, so I want to make sure that we are thinking about that in advance to make sure that it is absolutely possible because people like April Crohair and really need to have the access to be able to bring their children to see this event. So I will not be here. I will be out of town. So I will miss.
Of course.
But I hope that.
What? Been around the world and
I'm going to see my mom, so it's pretty simple. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Burnett?
Few things. Last week was very busy. Attended the Chamber of Commerce Economic Summit with Council Member Alshire and Scott, City Administrator, along with city staff. It's good to see the data to show what we're feeling. So that was a bit, comforting and sad at the same time. But it was good to see graphs and the sources to support that. And Washington County Museum, Councilmember Schindler and I attended the Picasso paper exhibit, which is huge. I highly recommend to check that out. And they were really excited to see city representatives there. Like, so many people came up to us and said, thank you for coming.
Aw,
So that was really cool. Operation Warm, big shout out to Hagerstown professional firefighters and Hagerstown Fire Department, 176 free coats to the Bester kids. They were so nice, and the firefighters, every time the kids would come in, they would get to their level, introduce themselves, ask them for their names, just have just conversations. I mean, their faces were just lit up. Not only they're getting a free coat, but they get to, explore the fire trucks. The teachers were appreciative. I talked to assistant principal, and she said this is one of the best events that's offered to the kids. Very, very heartwarming experience. And I attended the soft opening of the Mark, formerly Charlie's on Potomac, on accident. I didn't-
Tavern.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was soft opening. I just saw some people out front. I saw some people out front. I was like, oh, are they open? So I walked in there, and sure enough, it was soft opening. And I shared with some of the council members that inside there are pictures of city maps. As soon as you walk in, City of Hagerstown map of several of them all throughout the bar. And I thought it was really cute. So that's all. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Schindler?
Just a few things. Again, awesome story about the tree. I was actually hoping that what Councilmember McIntyre mentioned, that, we could try to get her here. That's great. So, I also wanted to say, our museum is world-class. For anybody that doesn't go regularly or hasn't been, go check it out. It's fantastic. That Picasso exhibit, there's more Picassos there than I've seen anywhere in the world. I mean, it's
There's a lot.
fantastic. The job they're doing over there is unbelievable. And then I just wanted to give a special shout out to Eric in the Parks and Rec Department. They're doing an awesome job. And I think Councilmember McIntyre would be happy to see, they put some new signage out at Pangborn Park, and there's even Spanish on the signs.
Thank you.
So-
Thank you for telling me that.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So, kudos.
Yeah.
They know that. My goodness. Well, I want to say it was awesome looking at you and Matt's pictures on social media as you guys, and Councilmember Alshire too. How did you get?
Did he know where
Did he know? How did that work out?
I made
Just
it
real
a
quick.
thing. You have to go.
Okay.
And he said, you know what? I'm gonna go. And I text him like almost every day up until that point. You're going right. You're going right. You're going right. So I was really happy to see him.
Yeah.
It was like the urban legend. Showed
Yeah.
up.
I mean, that was incredible. That,
Everyone was flocking to him.
Yeah.
Like, and he was like, oh, this is why. This is why it's so much.
it really, really upset me that I had the sinus infection, and I miss seeing Councilmember Schindler out, especially at Fountainhead at the Economic Summit. Wow, blew me away. So thanks for the pictures. Councilmember Schindler, thank you for the Veterans Ceremony. Thank you for your text at 7:30 in the morning to say, hey, Councilmember Brucey loaded those,
what are they, the flowers?
The wreaths.
The wreaths, I couldn't get it together. The wreaths up, and then, you know, we traveled around with him, and so council member reached out 7:30 and was like, hey, would it be helpful if I loaded those up in my truck? And I thought, absolutely, it would be helpful. So thank you for that. Thank you for being a team player. And also, I want to say thank you to Melissa Tucker and the staff at Homewood in Williamsport Retirement. They had a Veterans Day celebration, and I took probably 30 certificates out there to folks that are in the home that were armed forces in some type of way. An incredible celebration, but one of the things that was my favorite part, of course, in honoring the veterans, but Barbara Ingram, our own downtown high school band ensemble was out there, and it was incredible. They played all the songs and all the things, and it was just like, oh, look at downtown Hagerstown high school students getting to do this on Veterans Day. I thought that was amazing. The staff was very appreciative and thankful, even though it was outside the city limits, and I expressed to them how important it was for us, that even if it is outside the city limits, that we're still present, because they're still our residents. Some of them could have been our residents and retired. And I learned that, especially with the Admiral. The Admiral, his daughter was Teacher of the Year 2 years ago. I can't think of what her last name was, but the mom was like, thank you, City Council and Mayor, for supporting Teacher of the Year. So I wanted to share that with you guys. And y'all know I end awkward, but I'm not ending yet. I have something else. Oh, speaking of the Maryland Fine Arts Museum, I teach there on Saturdays. My last Saturday is this Saturday coming up, but last Saturday we did collages. Not we, because I'm not that kind of artist. I helped them with their branding. But they did collages. And the teacher is a student teacher at Williamsport. Her name is Andy. And she's interning and doing she teaches at Williamsport Elementary, I feel like. But hold on, the intern is Madison, who is interning through college. And I teach with this team. And they had them do collages and use Hagerstown magazines. And Lou Scally was like, and it's so funny because there's a whole generation that has no idea of who Lou Scally is. And I was like, how do you guys not know? So I gave them homework, but I shared those things with Lou Scally, and he was very excited. We even had Zyvie, who took the gray hair and made his hair black in his collage, and he said, man, I made him younger. But they were like, you know him? He's real? Like, oh my goodness, it was incredible. Again, the Fine Arts Museum offers a Saturday class that is free to middle schoolers, and it's Express and Explore. And what we found is that a lot of homeschool kids that don't have art program come to this on Saturdays, and it is incredible. So I agree with you. We have a world-class museum, and the Picasso is why we did the collages. And the kids to be able to see Picasso in middle school was like, oh my goodness, what? It was incredible. All right, and also, the Christmas tree story was amazing.
And confirmation, Mrs. King is expected to be on hand to light the tree.
Nice. That's amazing. I can't wait to meet her. I mean, when was Mr. King on council?
81 to 85.
Good God.
Yep.
I wasn't even 10.
81 to 85.
I mean, I'm saying wow. Well, thank you, Mrs. King.
What's that? Oh, who is one now?
He was.
Retired or former? Their son was a police officer, Jeff?
Bill King, right? Bill King was their son.
Wow. Wow. What an
Very cool.
incredible gift to the city, that you raised a tree, you grew a tree, and we cut it down. Well, did we cut it down? Whoever cut it down.
Yep.
Anyway, it's in our
Yep.
square, and we're going to light it. And thank you, Mrs. King. What'd you say? Yeah, that is awesome. And before this administration ends, we're definitely going to have some theme music. And with that, we're adjourned.
Hello and welcome to Council Wrap. I'm Wes Decker, joined by City Administrator Scott Nicewarner. One of the longer meetings that we've had in a while, but a lot of business to conduct. I mean, one topic after another.
It was. It was a good meeting, and there's a lot of heavy stuff going on, but it's heavy stuff that I think the citizens need to have addressed and need to have worked on, and not just in relation to the beginning of the meeting, but the railroad crossing, the grant stuff. It's what government's supposed to do, and I think tonight was a good meeting, a good example of that.
Yeah, and I think it had to be a little surprising, perhaps even to people who have been really paying attention to council meetings, that there was, opening up the meeting, the mayor talking about what council had decided last week about a new council member. Obviously, we remember it wasn't that long ago, just over 7 months ago, we went through the process of applications being accepted, and then, of course, the interviews that took place right here, and then, of course, Matt Schindler was appointed as a council member when we had some dominoes fall then, and now with council member Brucci moving on to a professional opportunity, leaving his seat open. The announcement was made by Mayor Martinez about what took place at last week's executive session. And certainly, I think I'd like to make it clear to the citizens of the city that this is certainly within the purview of the council to do it this way. They didn't have to do it the way that they did it the last time.
No, they didn't, and all they have to do is appoint, which is what they did. The only requirement is city resident, really.
Yeah.
And I think during the deliberation last week, I'm not going to get into it, but it was unanimous among the group that not only as to how the process was going to work, but who they were going to pick. Peter is certainly familiar to the council. His presence in Annapolis and he's respected in Annapolis. The connections he has with the administration. We had a lot of things going on in Annapolis this session, and I think that's going to be a major part of his tenure here. The timing of it's just kind of weird. Basically, what is today, the 14th? So now less than a year until the next election. And I think they just didn't want to have to go through that whole process again and take more time. And they knew who they wanted, and that's who they selected.
Yeah, I had a chance to talk to Peter a little bit yesterday, and he is certainly eager to get going, and said that he would be contacting you about attempting to get up to speed on everything, which is always a difficult process.
Yeah.
And I've talked about this before as I saw the last administration come in. When you're fresh to this, it is very difficult to be in mid-season form when you step in at your first meeting, and then, just like Councilmember Schindler, it's going to be the same thing basically for Peter Perini next week. He comes in, and then all of a sudden he's part of a meeting, and he'll actually be voting before that meeting's over.
Yeah, and with Councilman Schindler, he had his experience on the planning commission to understand how things go in Hagerstown to an extent.
Right.
But Peter's been part of this process for a long time.
Yeah.
And he knows many of the issues that occur here in the city, and a lot of the processes. It won't take much to get him up to speed at all. Just as it didn't with Councilman Schindler, who has jumped in with both feet and has been a great addition to the council, at least as far as staff is concerned. It's been great to work with, and Peter will too.
Yeah, and certainly, when we talk about the topics of conversation this afternoon and this evening, one that elicited a great deal of discussion certainly has to do with that fair level funding and tax differential as it relates to the city's fire service, something that has been talked about exponentially internally, and then just trying to get in front of the county commissioners. And we have that joint meeting with the commissioners coming up in December. So what's your feeling based on what transpired here? Will that be a topic that can be discussed then, or is that perhaps for a future meeting where we'll ask for more time in order to really have a solid discussion, a
Yeah.
productive discussion perhaps.
It needs to be more than 15 minutes than, than just sit and express it. We've done that. It doesn't work. I don't understand, from either body's perspective, why you would not want to sit down and go over these issues. Like I said during, the couple comments I made, we're not always right, but we're not always wrong.
Right.
And, same goes with the county. And Hagerstown is a part of the county. And, we're just a little bit more self-sustainable perhaps than some of the other municipalities, just simply because of our size. But that doesn't mean we do anything better, we do anything worse than the other municipalities. And I'm sure it's a little bit of both there. But it all does essentially boil down to citizen tax fairness. Doesn't put any more money in the city's pockets. We've said that every time we've had this conversation. The tax differential doesn't put any more money in our pocket. But what it does is it allows the city taxpayers to pay their fair share, not only to the city and to the county for the services that are provided. That's the only discussion that really needs to be had. And you would think that would be of mutual interest to both bodies. And I think there are those that will say that it is of mutual interest, whether you live in the unincorporated areas of the county, whether you live in another one of the smaller municipalities, whether you live in Hagerstown.
Yeah, it's all about fairness, and obviously that is not being achieved at this point. I jotted down a couple of questions out of that discussion, and these are sort of elementary type questions, but and this is in your opinion and based on your experience, but what would happen if the city of Hagerstown had no paid fire department? I mean, what would happen? I mean, because you hear this discussion about here's what the county does and brings to the table in terms of their volunteer departments and what they are able to do. And as you said, I mean, city taxpayers also paying county taxes.
Right.
So if the city didn't have its own paid fire department, and there must have been a reason for the establishment of that at whatever point in time,
Right.
but if that did not exist, would we be okay just with the county taking care of the city as it does the other municipalities?
I don't think there's no way the way it's currently structured. I mean, I think that horse is out of the barn to even attempt to guess what that would be like. Obviously, it would have to be a volunteer organization, or
Yeah.
the county at some point would have had to come in and paid. And had to pay, there'd had to be paid firefighters at some point in time. It'd just be a matter of who paid them if the city never had a paid fire department. But that is so ingrained right now that it would be impossible to even say what would happen. Certainly, if the paid fire departments were gone now, there's no way that the current structure would be able to handle it, just simply because of location and volume and that kind of thing. So,
Right. Yeah, a lot of logistics that just would
the
not work
logistics,
out.
yeah, the logistics wouldn't work out. It has nothing to do with who would be fighting the fire. It's just logistically, it'd be almost impossible.
Yeah,
It's not.
and another thing that came out of that discussion that I sort of took note of was that you have, Chief Lord talking about a moral and ethical responsibility as he sees it, in terms of who it is that goes where to fight fires and to take care of, emergency situations. And Councilmember Alshire certainly talking about it from the standpoint of the taxpayer. And I get that. You see that, again, there's that unfair differential that comes up, and it's very simple when you look at the dollars that are involved and what people are paying. And then you have the city saying, hey, all we want to do is talk to the county about this. Can we have that discussion? So one of the things that I wrote down was, so what does it take to make an elected official accountable to that and to stand up and say, yes, we'll have this discussion, because you've already laid it out there pretty much saying, hey, we're not saying that we're 100% right. We're not saying that you're 100% wrong, but let's have the conversation.
And not to give you a flippant answer, but you have to ask the elected official.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's just interesting because to me, it's like, who holds them responsible? Is it those who elect them? And if so, then the question comes back here that was talked about at this table earlier was, how do we get that information out to the city taxpayer?
Yeah.
That the city taxpayer gets, I guess, upset enough about that, motivated enough to say, hey, we need to take this to the county, or we need to.
I think when that came up, and I made the comment that it's not something we can wait an election cycle to figure out.
Right.
So what do you do in the meantime?
Yeah.
The only thing you can really try to do is just try to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, the way we operate here is that, you know, you're transparent and you have discussions and you disagree, you agree to disagree, but ultimately you try to come to a resolution.
That's right.
And again, I just go back to say, the issues we put on the table, they may not be all right, but they are not all wrong. And at least it certainly does warrant a discussion. It's a discussion I think every municipality needs to have as it relates to tax differential. Because the instances like what Councilman Alshire was talking about, especially in Cumberland.
Mm-hmm.
Cumberland receives a differential for their fire department. They also receive a different differential than every other municipality within Washington County. It's not what we're asking for out of the gate. The 12.5-cent differential has been the same since 2008. We would simply ask out of the gate to have that tax differential reevaluated, maybe not every year, maybe every 3-4 years, because the tax differential, I can tell you right now, is not 12.5 cents. It's 6 cents more than that. And that's not fair to continue to ask the taxpayer to accept a 12.5-cent differential across the board when 6 cents is being left on the table. Again, has nothing to do with what each municipality will be getting, but it has everything to do with what each citizen within these municipalities should be paying. And, you know, the county, an argument the county can make is that, well, it hurts their revenue because that would be a lower differential, but it's services that they aren't paying for anyway. It's services that our citizens are paying for that they're already getting in duplicate within their municipalities. So, and again, I stated, this is not just a Hagerstown, Washington County issue. This is a statewide issue,
yes,
at least
you
with
did.
93 other municipalities within the state of Maryland. A lot of those on the Eastern Shore that don't have a say in what their tax differential is, and some don't even get any tax differential for duplicate services. It's just not fair.
Where do you think this line came from that has been drawn between the city and the county? I mean, you don't really want to, you know, point fingers and say, hey, you know, somebody did it over here, so then it was done over here. But I don't really sense that when staff works together between the county and the city, that's the way that it's viewed. But even so, you know, in the discussion here, as Councilmember Alshire and Chief Lohr, you know, and Councilmember Alshire wanted to make that point that obviously the city is part of the county, but, you know, it just seems so much like that line is just one that is drawn in the sand all the time. And just because the city is the largest municipality, it sort of, you know, gets treated as the redheaded stepchild.
I get that, Rev. I don't look at it that way. I just, you know, look, the staffs work together fine.
Right.
As to what the motivations are on the elected side, you have to ask the electeds. I don't want to think politics plays that big of a role. Partisan politics plays that big of a role in Washington County. I would be probably super naive to think that, but if it does, it shouldn't.
Yeah.
Because the one thing I always heard is that at this level of government, the attention should be to the citizen, not to the party. And you know, I'm sure that happens, you know, for whatever party people belong to. But as staff are out to do a job, and regardless of what party they work for, and that's how, you know, we try to approach it from this angle. And we have to do things that our mayor and council feel are best for the citizens of Hagerstown, keeping an eye on the county because, we are the biggest municipality. We're the sixth largest in the state.
Yeah.
But we are definitely the largest here. And we want to be a good neighbor and a good residents of this county and make this county, because if, you'll hear a lot of people say if Hagerstown is successful, Washington County is successful, and vice versa. And that should be the way we look at it, not, what politics are involved.
Yeah, it needs to be a win-win for both,
It has
because
to be.
everybody wins
Sure.
when that happens, and.
Or we're both going to lose, and like I said before, when it came to residential development and the need to figure out this water thing, if Washington County and Hagerstown get the reputation of not being business-friendly
Yeah.
and not getting along, they will go to Martinsburg. I'm in Falling Waters, multiple times a week, and I see how that area is exploding. That's where it will go. It will go to Greencastle and Antrim Township and all the way out to McConnellsburg and those kind of places, and it will leave us behind. And I'm not just talking about warehouses. I'm talking about manufacturing plants. I'm talking about just simply residential, because they are coming over the mountain finally, thanks to COVID and the ability to do remote work. I have a neighbor that recently moved from Prince George's County because they could, and they could pay less for the same amenities and live in a smaller town, and that's what they did. That will dry up if we don't get our acts together.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I think when you look at the topics that you sort of outlined potentially for that joint meeting with the county commissioners, it even goes beyond that. I mean, you talk about the narcotics task force, talk about the school capacity, things of that nature. Do we have any idea at this point when that meeting might happen or what that agenda might look like?
We'd like to see it in December.
Okay.
That is tentatively when we've asked for it. I think we'll have to have some discussions. Again, I don't want it to just be a 15-minute thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think this council wants it to be just a 15-minute, here's the problems, thank you, next up. I think this needs to be an ongoing effort. It needs to sit time. You need to sit around, roll your sleeves up, have discussion, frank discussions, public discussion, and everybody has to sit and be transparent and put it out there. And that's the only way it'll do just for the citizens. And if that means, something that, we need to have someone else in here to facilitate the meeting and allow staff to do their thing, but have a facilitator, I would hope it would never get to that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can't have two bodies talking to each other and being frank, then we got bigger problems than water and tax differential at that point.
Yeah.
Just to be completely frank and honest, as I always am with you.
You are. One final question for you, going back to the opportunity to talk to some legislators that might be able
Yep.
to make a difference for Hagerstown, Washington County, and beyond. What was your assessment of being able to address them? You were able to do that in one capacity on behalf of the Maryland Municipal League, and then, of course, kind of sit back as mayor and council address them. But what was your assessment of that as we move forward?
I think this group of our delegation in Washington County is very strong. I think the representation we have, not only from our local delegate for the city, Brooke Grossman, Senator Quarterman, and then also the others, the outliers, the Terry Bakers, the Bill Wivels, the Bill Valentines, the Mike McKays. I think we are in a little bit different situation now because it is a different political administration than what we are majority out here. But that's okay. I think as much as they stand for what they support as far as their political party, their political persuasion is, so to speak, they keep what is in the best interest of Washington County in the forefront. And we have our delegate that will do that for us within Hagerstown, and our senator that also understands it too. Again, we may not always agree as a city the direction they want to go as far as the administration is concerned. But again, They allow us to express that. I appreciate the fact they allowed me to take a little bit of their time to discuss Maryland Municipal League priorities. But also the ability to sit and listen to us and keeping the dialogue open. And I appreciate everything they do. We wouldn't be in a situation we are now with having the economic development we have in this city, in this county, if they weren't a part of it. And we just need to keep that communication, that momentum going.
Yeah, well, we've heard communication a lot in this discussion.
But that's what,
but that's the key.
That's what it is.
It's the
I
key
mean,
to
that's all it
productivity,
is.
isn't it?
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, it really
It's,
is.
you know, it's just a total pet peeve of mine. If you got a problem with me, talk to me.
Yeah.
If you don't talk to him and her, or post all over
Right.
social media,
Yeah.
do whatever, talk to me. And that's all. If we have a problem with the county commissioners, we need to talk to county commissioners. They got a problem with us, talk to us, and let's figure it out. Don't just throw darts and play to whatever you're playing to. Let's figure it out. This isn't. We're not going to make kings around here. So let's just talk to each other and figure it out.
I've found two things are very true with you. You're not hard to find, and you're not hard to talk to.
Nope.
And thanks for talking to me this evening. I appreciate it.
For you, anytime.
That is City Administrator Scott Nicewarner. Thanks to all of you for watching. I'm Wes Decker. I'll see you next time on Council Wrap. For now, that is a wrap.